Good evening and welcome to the Orange County School Board's Rule Development Work Session on Tuesday, May 28th, 2020. We are having two different events going on this evening. One of them is a series of workshops and one is a work session. And we'll outline that in just a minute. But before we begin, since we have many of our school board members are participating via WebEx, let me do a roll call telephonically. So beginning with Member Gallo. Member Gallo, are you present?
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Member Lopez? Member Lopez, I'm sure will be joining us in a few minutes. Member Cobert?
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Member Vice Chair Gould?
Present. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Dr. Gordon?
Madam Chair, I'm present.
Wonderful. Dr. Castrodental?
I'm here.
Wonderful. Nice to see you too. And Member Byrd?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And yes, Member Castrodental, there you are, I see you. All right, so we have the majority of our board members with us. The ones that are not with us, Member Lopez, I'm sure will be joining us in just a minute. We'll introduce her when she gets here. As I mentioned, this is a two-part meeting consisting of Rule Development Workshop to discuss potential revisions to school board policies, IKFB, graduation exercises, GCCAB, instructional staff personnel, emergency, legal, religious leave, GCCBB, administrative staff, personal, emergency, legal, religious leave, and GDCB, support staff, personal, emergency, legal, religious leave, followed by a work session to discuss capacity enhancement agreements. With that, let me turn the meeting over to Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are going to get right into our policies so we can move on to the second portion of our time together here this afternoon. Mr. Palmerini, part of our legal department, is going to walk us through those four policies. And I believe we have only one speaker on the line when we are complete with that presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Do we know which policy the speaker is calling in for? Okay. I believe I'm understanding.
IKFB.
Okay, graduation exercises. Thank you very much. Mr. Palmerini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm going to scroll through the technology to make sure that I am doing it correctly. So have you all seen your screen move to where it says agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So as the superintendent said, we have four policies today. I want to go through an overview. We'll do the timeline. We're going to do a summary of the actions, proposed revisions, next steps, and questions and discussions. The purpose, obviously, as you all know, is to assure compliance with applicable state, federal and state laws, State Board of Education rules, policies, procedures, and guidelines. These policies were reviewed in Cabinet on April the 6th, 2020. Today is our Rule Development Workshop on May 28th. If this gets your go-ahead to go to the board for final approval, that date will be June 23rd, and these policies will be effective upon your approval. And the four policies that the superintendent listed, graduation exercises, and then we have three policies with regard to administrative, regard to personal, emergency, legal, and religious leave. All three of those policies are going to be the same, so instead of going through it three times, I'm going to do it once, but it will be applicable to all of our instructional staff personnel, our administrative staff personnel, and support staff personnel. All right, segueing into IKFB, graduation exercises. And if this seems somewhat familiar, it is, because we have done this before, and we took the board's comments at the previous Rule Development Workshop, and we have hopefully incorporated in those changes. We are revising it to make sure the existing policy language includes legislative updates. We're editing for content, formatting, and terminology, and we're making sure we're consistent with statutory language. Okay, getting into it. First, graduation exercises shall be prohibited for elementary and middle schools. And we had the policy discussion around that the last time we were here. And so what we did is we went back and looked, and I just wanted to ensure that we looked at the student progression plan And that student progression plan that the board has adopted also has prohibition on graduation exercises for elementary and middle schools. So that's why we kept the language prohibiting those graduation exercises. But what we did is we said, while elementary and middle schools may have ceremonies for students recognizing outstanding accomplishments, graduation exercises may only be conducted by high schools, technical colleges, and to address a concern that Dr. Gordon had in the previous meeting, we are also saying other alternative sites and programs in which students receive high school diplomas or equivalent. So Beta, the
33rd Street Jam. Yeah. Magnolia.
Magnolia, yes. This would include, this policy revision would include all of those programs. So we were addressing the concern that you raised, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you.
We added language with regard to rules and procedures for graduation. Mrs. Gallo had a comment about how would these students know what the rules and procedures are for graduation. What we did is we added a sentence in the policies that says, the high school office shall ensure that rules and procedures for graduation ceremonies are provided to students and published on the high school's website. So they will be able to find those rules and procedures prior to the graduation ceremony. Military dress at graduation ceremonies. There was a statutory change last year that required school boards to adopt policies that allow military dress at graduation ceremonies. This is not ROTC uniforms, as a reminder. This is for people who have joined the reserves after their junior year. They've gone through boot camp, and then they serve on the reserves during their senior year. And at that point, if they're in the reserves, they get to wear their military dress uniform. This arose out of a case from Hillsborough County in which a student who was in the reserves was prohibited from wearing their dress uniform. The legislature revised the law to ensure that that would be allowed. We, of course, added the language with regard to student graduation speeches. And it looks very similar to what we had last time, but I do want to highlight some changes that we made after comments from the board. There was a question about selection of student graduation speakers and whether selections of valedictorian, salutatorian, senior class president, and student government association president. Remember, our student speakers have to be selected based upon neutral criteria. And we spelled out in the policy that the neutral criteria, especially for valedictorian, salutatorian, senior class president, and student government association president, shall be set forth in the student progression plan, because we have language in the student progression plan about how valedictorians and salutatorians will be chosen. And obviously, starting next year, as Dr. Border described previously, there will only be one valedictorian and one salutatorian per school based upon the student who holds the highest weighted grade point averages on courses taken through the first 7 semesters. So we wanted to ensure that that policy for neutral criteria reference the student progression policy so the board could be assured of that. Again, under the statutory provisions that have been passed by the legislature, discrimination against the student's voluntary expression of a religious viewpoint on otherwise permissible subject is prohibited. So this is aimed at prohibiting school boards from stopping students who want to have some religious content in their speech. Students may not engage in obscene, vulgar, offensively lewd, or indecent speech. That's come straight from the statute. A student graduation speech does not reflect the endorsement, sponsorship, or expression of the board or its employees. And a disclaimer must be included on the graduation exercise program at all graduation events or any other event at which a student speaks publicly. So this, of course, the statement that says the student's speech is not shall not reflect the endorsement of the board will be in the actual graduation program. We have the provision in there that says the student may not be restricted or prohibited from delivering a graduation speech by any employee of the board without prior review and approval from the general counsel or designee. So that will ensure that if there's a legal review to ensure that student speech isn't being curtailed on an unpermissible basis. And then finally, we added a provision in that policy that says, after discussion from the board, it says the form of the graduation speech whether presented live or via pre-recorded video/audio, shall be uniform in each school ceremony. So if you have core student speakers, valedictorian, salutatorian, senior class president, and student government president, they will all either be live or they will all either be video, but you won't have mixes and matches. So those are the summary of the changes, and I will be happy to answer any questions the board has.
To be recognized. Dr. Gordon, did you wish to be recognized?
No, I'm just
Okay.
having fun. I sent a wonderful note to John.
Okay, thank you. I do want to remind the board members, though, to not use the chat feature to communicate with each other or even
No, I did it
than the
for
queue.
everyone. It said everyone.
Then, Sanval, let me ask you to make copies of the chats from a public record standpoint, so there's no question.
So you, as whoever is hosting, is the one who has the ability to save those.
Right.
Okay, we can ask that.
We'll figure, yeah.
The other quick way to do it
Yeah.
is literally you can scroll all the way up, cut and paste them, but we need to save them. All right, Dr. Gordon, you have a comment on this?
Yes. One thing I would like to say, be very careful when you do send the chats between each other. It could be a violation depending on the topic. I think that's why we keep it on everyone. And then not only that, once you do that, sometimes it's very difficult to get back in the channel. We've had that to happen to us on a couple of our conferences that we've been having with the different teams. So once you know, as General Counsel Anvil is stating, sometimes you can get out there and can't get back in. So if they can, and then somebody else can kick you out. So you have to be very careful. They haven't mastered that piece yet.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. And I think I may have covered this a couple of times when we were having some technical, but let me cover it again because it's very important. It is not okay to communicate with other board members, even if it's to everyone. So all board members, the only thing you are to put in the chat is Q, because anything else is going to the other board members during a meeting and without the public being able to see it. Mm-hmm. So even if you're communicating something to a staff member and you're saying everyone, it's still going between everyone. So just to be safe, just use your Q, and any other nice comments, we'll just save those to have them verbally spoken so that the world has an opportunity to see what we're saying. I speak from experience. Not experience that was pleasant to go through, but experience I never want my fellow board members to go through. So let's move on then. We have no other public speakers, or no other members of the boards, and we do have a member of the public that wishes to speak, two now that wish to speak on this issue. So Ms. Envil, I'm going to ask you if you will help us introduce them.
Yes, we are ready for our first speaker.
We have Erica Vasquez on the line.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. Thank you for calling. If you can give your name and address for the record first, then you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments. Ms. Envol, our legal counsel, will ring the bell when you're in your last 30 seconds, so you know that your time is wrapping up. And we appreciate hearing from you this afternoon. Whenever you're ready to start.
Okay. My name is Erica Vasquez. My address is 5926 Lake Point Village Circle, Orlando, Florida, 32822.
Go ahead with your comments.
Okay, the comment that I wanted to make was I understand the graduation exercises policies regarding the graduation, specifically for high school, being that, it's 12th grade. And we want to celebrate our graduates, but I feel that elementary and middle school should also have some type of recognition. My son attends Liberty Middle School, and They put out a list of students who received awards and recognitions from teachers, and my son, unfortunately, was not included on that list. And I feel it was a retaliation because I'm that mom who just basically, I will advocate for my son. I will die on that hill. I feel that all these kids, every student of every age and every grade, should receive some type of recognition because we have endured something unlike we'll probably never see in our lifetime again. So I think it's very disheartening that I've heard other schools, including my daughter's charter school as well as a public school, they did like a little drive-by parade, or, they did something to celebrate them. And Liberty made a video of the memories of 6th to 8th grade, and my son was not included in not one of those pictures, and that hurts me. And I will not be showing my son that video because I felt rejected. So I can imagine how he would feel if he had seen that video. I think there needs to be a little more recognition for our kindergarteners and for our middle school and for every grade, like I said, because, this is something that we've never been through before. And I think it's truly disheartening that my son was, I feel, targeted and left out. That's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. Let me just respond briefly to clarify one point. Because the graduations are limited to students who are officially graduating from their 13 years of public education, does not mean that there can't be recognition of students at the elementary and middle school level. We just do not confuse or misuse the term graduation. So I understand your point. In terms of retaliation, if you believe there is an issue there, I would definitely recommend that you bring that to to principal's attention, and if you feel it needs to go higher, you could bring that to Dr. Maria Vasquez so she can look into it. I do want to point out that we do not, even if parents are more involved and asking tough questions, and even if it's not appreciated, and I hope that's not the case, our students should never be retaliated against. So we don't condone that, although I also think it's very possible that there may be a lot of children who didn't make it in the video. So I think we need to evaluate that carefully, but I take to heart your concerns. Can we take our next caller?
The next caller we lost.
I'm sorry, we lost the next caller? Okay. Yes. Do we have any idea why we lost them, or they're just not on the phone anymore?
They're just not on the phone anymore.
Okay. I only ask because I do from time to time get emails from people that are frustrated. Actually, I don't get them from time to time. I got my first one today. And so I just want to make sure on the back end, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we are hanging on to our callers or have a way to call them back. So we will move forward and with our next rule. And am I going back to Mr. Palmerini or back to you, Mr. Palmerini? Are you present, sir?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Can you hear me?
All right. I can hear you. And you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All right.
I had a question.
Yes, I'm sorry. We have a question from, thank you, Dr. Gordon. We have a question from Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So let me get an understanding. So the caller was concerned about her son and being at Liberty. I want to make sure I'm sending the right messages. I have 4 middle schools, and we all have lots of elementary school. So are you saying that I need to tell my parents that they need to go back to the principal or to Dr. Marie Vasquez to solve that problem? I'm confused because that is not what we've been doing in the past. So can you help me with the statement that you made so that we will not have mixed messages out there? Because most of the principals in my district are very experienced, and I have a district that loves to celebrate, and it's just common knowledge that we acknowledge every child in the school. You know, some kind of way we always have tried to include them. I feel that at Liberty it may have been an oversight. I don't know because there are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders there. But I need to know what message that we're telling the parents. We're asking them to go back to the principal or either go to Dr. Marie Vasquez. Help me out there, please.
I will be happy to. What she raised was 2 issues. One was she wanted there to be recognition of the students. I addressed that first by explaining to her that that is absolutely possible and that this rule that we're discussing does not preclude that, and that we like to see all of our students recognized. That was the first half of my answer. The second part went to her allegations that her son is being retaliated against because of her speaking up on behalf of advocating for her son. And she gave several examples of how she believes that he's being retaliated and discriminated against because of her involvement. That issue, I suggested that she bring it to the principal's attention, or if she did not feel that was appropriate, because Dr. Vasquez is sitting right in the room with me, she nodded over and asked me to ask that parent to contact her directly. So that was my message.
Well, see, you all are communicating between each other, and you have privy to information that the entire board doesn't have. So it sends a mixed message because it came across as if anything dealing with the graduation, and I heard you loud and clear because I take copious notes, and I have your statement, which I thought was exceptional and excellent. But then when it got to the part, you know, with the retaliation, and the whole retaliation is because he's not included. Okay, so I just had a very bad mixed message there, and I needed clarification as to our policy and what parents can do to, and what administrators and schools can do to get all of the children involved so that there will not be any retaliation during graduation and promotion exercises, not graduation for middle school, but promotion exercises that we really championed that years ago when I taught at Orange Center Elementary, and the district picked it up, promotional exercises. So thank you, Madam Chair, for clearing it up.
Thank you. So, Dr. Gordon, I will go back and I'll watch this, and I would encourage you to do the same. I think what I was saying was clear, and there were 2 separate issues, and the retaliation.
They were, but you had information in between. I did not know you had communicated with Dr. Marie Vasquez. Okay. You said that she communicated with you and said to send the parent to her. We weren't privy to that note. So that's all I'm bringing in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I think that would still be the correct direction, because if the student's not satisfied, but
for the retaliation.
Yes,
for the
exactly.
retaliation, not for the promotion exercises.
Correct.
The school can come up with that with the team.
Yes, Dr. Jenkins or Dr. Gordon, that's exactly what I said. We're in a complete agreement. Let's move on to Mr. Pomerani.
If I may interrupt, I'm sorry. We do have the caller is back on the line.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, thank you. Who's our next caller?
We have Doreen Cruz on the line.
Ms. Cruz, were you on the line earlier, and did we lose you?
Yes, you sure did, and I do apologize for that.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm happy if it's on your end. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't on our end.
No. I know things are crazy. Okay. I've never done this before, but.
No, I understand. We're all new to this.
Okay.
So thank you for calling, Ms. Cruz. If I can ask you to give your name and address, and then as soon as you're finished with that, if you just share with us your comments, you'll have 3 minutes, and we are glad you were able to get back on the line.
Okay, no problem. My name is Doreen Cruz. My address is 5926 Lake Point Village Circle, Orlando, Florida, 32822. May I continue?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm calling also in reference to a previous call that I heard, and this is my grandson that I'm referring to. And it is about him being recognized on the list, because I'm from old school. I was back in school. I haven't been in school, should I say, since the 70s, but I do remember quite well when everybody's name went on the list. And I was sad to see that his name wasn't on the list at all. It was like he didn't even get promoted. He didn't even get recognized. He didn't even graduate. He's considered a graduate. No. So that was my concern. And when I found out that his name wasn't there, it kind of bothered me. So that's why I've come to this point. And I just wanted to share that. I don't know what could be done with it, how it would be addressed. But I think everybody should be recognized. And that's all I really have to say.
So, Ms. Cruz, if you could hold just for a minute so I can get clarification. Your son is a senior and he graduated from high school? I mean, your grandson.
My grandson. He graduated from middle school.
From middle school. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And just for clarification, what middle school is he at?
Liberty.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Cruz, for sharing your concern on that issue.
No problem. Thank you as well. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Of course. Okay, Mr. Palmerini, we're back to you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. The next policy is GCCAB, Instructional Staff, Personal Emergency Legal Religious Leave. Again, we've made changes to this policy to revise the circumstances when the superintendent may authorize discretionary emergency leave with or without pay. And right now, the current policy says the superintendent is authorized to grant discretionary emergency leave when the board's facilities are closed. And the policy is going to be revised to say when schools or other school board of Orange County, Florida facilities are closed. And then the added language is, or when an OCPS employee is prevented or not allowed to report to the work site at the order of the superintendent due to a natural disaster or other catastrophe, discretionary emergency leave with or without pay may be granted by the superintendent to the full-time and part-time benefited instructional staff who are prevented from reporting to work. And as I said, it's the same for administrators. It's the same change for our classified members. It's just expanding the circumstances in which the superintendent will be authorized to grant discretionary emergency leave. Obviously, with our facilities being closed, that would be a hurricane is a perfect example of when discretionary emergency leave may or may not be appropriate. And then it says when OCPS employees are prevented or not allowed to report to the work site. We've had situations where the roads have been closed around particular schools where employees couldn't report. So this change would encompass those types of situations as well. And the change is being made, like I said, for all of our employee groups. So I'm not going to repeat the same presentation 2 more times if that is okay with the board.
I think that's exceptionally okay with the board. Thank you very much, Mr. Palmerini. Excellent job explaining it. Let me open this up then to feedback from board members. And I believe Member Gallo is the next in line on this subject. I believe Dr. Gordon's comments were related to the previous caller. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question, if I may.
Please.
So what we've been through hurricanes and situations where roads were closed and stuff beginning all the way back in 2004. What did we do then, and what prompted this policy change now?
Mr. Palmerini?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We have, when the facilities have been closed, there have been certain times when, we've had to make days up on the back end in order to ensure that we had the number of days that we need to have for instruction under state law, which is 180 days. If we've had days waived, we've done that, but we have paid our employees in the past, and there's other circumstances in state law where it says you're not supposed to advance employees' salary at a time before they work. So we've utilized this provision in order to make sure that our employees don't lose out. Because what we didn't want in those types of circumstances is, especially like for our classified workers who are hourly, if they miss 2 days, we don't want them to be without 2 days worth of pay, because that could have a tremendous hardship for our classified employees. So we have utilized this provision in the past to make sure our employees have been paid, and then we have them make it up on the back end. What prompted the change in this policy? A couple things. Like I said, we had a situation, I guess it was a couple years ago, with respect to one of our schools, and I'm sure you remember that we had, a situation where we had a couple law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty at responding to a person who had been accused of a horrible crime. And what happened is there was a manhunt going on in the area of that school. So our people were prevented from getting to it because all the roads going in and out of that school were blocked. So we wanted to take care of that type of situation. Plus, going into this pandemic that we have, we wanted to ensure that we had all the tools in the toolkit to allow the superintendent, in case we had to, pay employees while they were prevented from coming to work. We wanted to make sure we had policies in place to do that. So that's part of the motivation for the change.
Follow-up question, Member Gallo? Follow-up question, Member Gallo?
No, Chair, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from board members? All right, anything further, Mr. Palmerini?
No, ma'am.
All right, so hearing no additional question from board members on any of the policies that Mr. Palmerini has outlined, I will take that as good direction from the board that we can move forward at this time. Again, we're not taking a vote from the board at this time, but we will move on to the advertising of these policies and bringing them back for a final hearing in front of the board. All right, we will move on now then to the next portion of our board meeting, and that's to discuss capacity enhancement agreements and discuss what has taken place as a result of 7031 passing. Let me begin by turning it over to Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of our board members who have been around for some time might be familiar with CEAs. Newer board members have had exposure to the whole CEA process in times past. 7103 certainly put a wrench into all of our procedures, and we thought this would be a good time to make sure everyone is on the same page, not just our board, past and newer board members, but also our community, the development community and municipalities and other elected officials. This is a good time for a review of how we got to this point. And so I want to certainly thank our General Counsel, Amy Enville, and those that she has worked with around this tutorial, if you will, to bring everybody to an understanding and on the same page. Also want to comment that the chair in her past capacity certainly has tremendous expertise in this area and has been helpful in all of the discussions as well. It's a good time, as I say, for all of us to get on the same page, have same common understanding, and we want our general public to understand as well, so that we are not misunderstood in the decisions that this board has to make. We want everyone to be clear. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Enville, who will introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Today we have Chris Wilson with us, who is our helping us in outside capacity for attorney for in our real estate and facilities issues. And then we also have Stephen Thorpe, who is one of our facilities employees. I don't know his official title, but I'm going to turn it over to them. We worked pretty hard on the presentation and trying to make it as cohesive as possible. So.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Superintendent, Madam Chair, and Board. This is Chris Wilson. Steve and I are going to walk you through this presentation. Steve, are we? Okay. Technical issues.
As we wait to get the presentation up, let me just comment for anybody who might be watching. We say we're going to talk about CEAs, but it's not possible to talk about capacity enhancement agreements and the status and problems associated with those today without talking about just a brief history of our growth management, how it relates to school overcrowding, and how we came to even create these vehicles called capacity enhancement agreements. So it will be a bit of a history lesson, but the history is extremely important because, as Dr. Gordon will always tell us, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And there's nothing more true in this case. I think having a good foundation of why when we started including schools in the decision of whether or not to approve zoning and comp plan amendments, how we included them, and what the school board's role is extremely important for us to, as a community, to make the correct decisions moving forward. We good?
Thank you.
All right, we're good. I stalled long enough. Gentlemen, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. That was excellent.
All right. We can move forward to the agenda. So just to walk everybody through, we're going to look at the history of Orange County approach to school capacity. We're going to talk about the House Bill 7103 and its effect on our current process, post House Bill 7103 approaches to growth management and school capacity, go through the status of current post House Bill 7103 capacity determinations, and then open it up for a discussion. So we'll move forward into the history. Okay. So we're going to talk about the school board and local government role in growth management. We're going to talk about pre-Martinez doctrine, pre-2000 basically. We're going to talk about the Martinez doctrine, which came about in 2000, the 2004 Orange County Charter Amendment, and then we're going to get into the interlocal agreements in a little more detail as part of our history. So we just want to make the kind of overall point of the school board's role versus the local government's role. And the school board's role is to advise local government whether capacity exists for new development. And when we say new development, we mean unvested residential units at the time of an application to amend the comprehensive plan or rezone property to a higher density. The local government's role is to weigh the interests of that new development and growth against the school board's ability to provide capacity for that development. Now, as we're going through these roles have been consistent throughout the various time periods we're going to discuss. So if we talk about pre-Martinez doctrine, pre-2000, local government really had no input from the school board as to whether capacity existed for new development. There was no mitigation strategy to fund the additional capacity for new development, created overcrowded schools, and basically led us to the Martinez doctrine. So the Martinez doctrine came about in 2000. Martinez wanted to make sure that the county took into consideration whether school capacity existed for new development. It only applied to Orange County and not municipalities. So when we want to look at the mitigation strategy as we're going through the history, here developers pay the actual cost to create capacity at the time of approval by funding new schools or new wings. And some might remember consortiums where groups got together of developers to fund an entire school. And so
Yes.
looking at the actual cost. Yes, ma'am. So smaller developers argued that they were shut out because the mitigation strategy was too expensive, or we couldn't add an individual student station, which I think is kind of a theme that still continues to this day.
Yes.
We have to have enough students to justify the new school. We can move forward to the charter amendment. So we come forward to the charter amendment. Now, under the Martinez doctrine, it didn't apply to municipalities. And so what happened was we had an issue where a municipality approved a development that overcrowded a school in the county. And the county, those citizens didn't have a voice in that decision. And that led to the 2004 Orange County Charter Amendment. So it applies to unincorporated Orange County, all the municipalities, It was approved by 73.9% of voters in Orange County. It was reapproved by 65.9% of voters in 2012. So it requires the certification by the school board as to whether school capacity exists at the time of approval for proposed development. It introduced the joint approval process, which was to ensure that all significantly affected local governments approve a new development where the school board is unable to certify capacity. And that's important. That was the piece that took care of where two jurisdictions, one's approving and is overcrowding a school and the other, that the other jurisdiction has the ability to have a say in that process. And then we'll define significantly affected local government means there's 10% of the student population of the impacted school is within that neighboring local government. So they have a say.
So, Chris, if I can interrupt for just a minute. So, as the district commissioner at the time, in fact, I wasn't in office in 2000 when the Martinez Doctrine started, but my children were in Metro West Elementary School. It was at the time the most overcrowded school in all of Orange County. And as soon as the Martinez Doctrine was implemented, and Mel Martinez told his staff to recommend denial, but the Board of County Commissioners was free to vote however they wanted to, but they began voting down anything that didn't have capacity. Well, that was good news to me as a parent in overcrowded schools, but one large property owner decided they wanted to annex their property into the city, and it would have added more students to Metro West Elementary School. And I think that for me, and I think for Mel Martinez, it was kind of an eye-opener that what looked like a good plan did not necessarily solve the problem. In that case, Glenda Hood was the mayor, and she listened to our concerns, and she actually rejected their application to create apartments on the property. But that didn't have to be the case. It could have been the other way around. And then, of course, in 2003, the situation that Chris already described, at that time I was the sitting District 1 commissioner, and really felt that there was nothing that we could do until I started thinking about how we could better use the charter. I share that with you because the charter very clearly lays out the two roles that Chris discussed, and the role of the school district is just to answer that question if we have capacity. It was never intended to put the school district in the position where they are approving or denying development, and there was always supposed to be an avenue by which a developer could come forward. So and the most important thing I think in all of this is that the real purpose of it was to make sure that citizens generally had representation, but not to put the burden on the school district that I feel like is currently on us today. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You can slide. So just to summarize the charter provisions, this is where there's a county or municipal rezoning, comprehensive plan amendment that increases residential density that shall only be effective upon the approval by the governing boards of all significantly affected local governments, where the school district cannot certify that there is sufficient capacity. That's just wanted to lay that back out again in simple words. So as we get into the charter amendment, what is the mitigation strategy? And it's actually very similar, pretty much the same as it was with the Martinez Doctrine. Developers pay the actual cost to create capacity at the time of approval by funding new schools or funding new wings. The consortiums are still in play. It still has the same issue that small developers were concerned because the mitigation was too expensive, or we couldn't add those individual student stations and they felt stuck. So that brings us forward to the interlocal agreements. So these interlocal agreements are applicable to Orange County, all the participating municipalities. It's a contractual agreement between the signatories. It's statutorily mandated for long-term school planning and concurrency. And we mentioned concurrency there. That's statutory. That process is still continuing. It's not impacted. And the long-term school planning just requires the school board to share its capital plan with the county and the cities, and the city to share growth with the school board to keep everybody in line. The key, though, is that it does also include the homegrown process for the interplay between the school board and the local governments to review new development and school capacity to comply with the Orange County Charter. So here's where we get into the mitigation strategy. And we're going to get a little further in on this one than we did on the other ones, because this is what we've been working under since 2008. So with the capacity enhancement process, what comes along with the ILAs, it's fixed a proportional formula for the mitigation payment. We count capacity available within 3 years instead of capacity at the time of application. Move the timing of mitigation payment to platting for single family or site plan for multifamily. This created certainty for large and small developers alike, as the mitigation payment is based on a formula. And the next key is that under the charter, the ILA, in the absence of available capacity within 3 years, the execution of a CEA by OCPS serves as certification of capacity. So when we say we're certifying capacity, what is it that what is our goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? And you can see the highlighted language. This is right out of the ILA, and we're trying to ensure that overcrowding existing at the time of the submittal of a complete application shall not be aggravated. That is the goal of certifying capacity. And so to go through and show you in a little more detail, we're going to discuss the formulas that go into how we determine capacity and the formulas for how we determine mitigation. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stephen Thorpe for the next slide.
Great, thank you, Chris. So how we determine if there is available school capacity is really defined in our interlocal agreements. The formula on the screen that you see here really takes a look at the school capacity for the applicable school zone that the project is located in, the adopted level of service for that school zone, as well as the October enrollment for that school zone at the time of the start of the school year, plus any reserved capacity that previous projects have reserved for them for the future developments during the concurrency process. Now, if there's available school capacity at the time of application, or capacity that will be available with the relief school within 3 years, then OCPS will make a determination that there is capacity and we can certify as such. If not, pre-House bill, the applicant would have the opportunity to seek into a capacity enhancement agreement, and we would go through the process, drafting that agreement and getting that approval before they can go to the local government for their final approval or denial. So just to go through an example of what we actually do today, this is an example from an approval letter that we sent to a developer fairly recently. And this is an example of a project with 36 new unvested units at the elementary school level. And I do have some animations here to show where this formula gets break down in this review. So of course we start at the school capacity, which is determined at the beginning of every school year. In this case is 2019 to 2020 school year. We take a look at the adopted level of service, which we do multiply depending on the school district or on the school zone. And then also we take a look at the October enrollment. This is the number that gets set at the beginning of every school year that gets updated into our database, and every school year this number gets updated, which can affect projects that may have existed the year before, the year after, or today. And then we also look at the reserve capacity. So this is, again, through our concurrency process. Projects will previously have encumbered capacity, reserve capacity. They've prepaid their impact fees. They have entered into mitigation agreements, and we must make sure that those seats are available when these calculations are done. So with this process, with this particular application, taking a look at all the available seats, there are in this particular school 125 available seats. And for the type of development with 36 unvested units, this project passes, because this project only generates roughly 7 seats and there are 125 available seats. In addition, this project also received a pass for their middle and high school levels because the schools at the time did not have any overcrowding scenarios. And this is our capacity determination workflow. This is really the process that we as OCPS have established that developers can go through depending on what the capacity situation is. Now, I just went through an approval, which would be this green box for yes, where if there is capacity available, then the developer can go through, give the county or the cities, whoever the jurisdiction is, this approval letter saying OCPS is great, we have no issues, let's take us to our public hearing and get approved or denied. Now, alternatively, we can also issue letters that say no, either one or more of the school zones do not have capacity. Now, pre-House bill, we have the option to seek the CEA. And that has been the process that's gone through for every developer really since the implementation of the charter and the interlocals. However, you can see on the screen here that in gray that the developers and the applicants, depending on the scenario with the school zones and the jurisdictional boundaries, the joint approval process could also be available to them. And that's something that we, as OCPS, has never had to go into as of today. Now, going back to the pre-House bill, the CEA process, applicants, even though they may get a CEA, still have to go to local government for approval denial, and that's not a guarantee for a CEA is never a guarantee for a development to actually get approved.
Stephen, before you go on, I want to just pause here for a minute and just query the board, see if everybody has followed us to this point, especially with regard to this slide, because I think this is the pivotal piece that's been most missing for most people in the industry, is that there was always intended to be a different path besides the CEAs. There was, the charter anticipates, in fact, the charter never even mentions CEAs or mitigation. Charter anticipates two things: the school board has capacity or doesn't, and if it doesn't, then it requires joint approval of all significantly affected local governments. That makes sure that citizens always know that they have a representative that's representing them, that's involved in that decision-making process. So let me recognize Member Gould, Vice Chair Gould, at this time.
So I'm abundantly familiar with the CEA process. And when I was asking about a remedy for CEA, I don't think I fully understood the applicant may still seek joint approval. Will that mean that we just don't get any fees at all to help with our capacity, and that it can still move forward if all affected local governments? And in that, all significantly affected local governments, does that include OCPS?
So let me answer that question. And Member Gallo, I'll call on you in just a minute. A lot of people, and throughout this process, nobody has ever tried to utilize the joint approval. I think developers have always preferred to pay and go. And I think that municipalities and the county always felt that that was the easier route as well. So you do not even see a process laid out in the interlocal agreements today. But I want to bring us back to why do we have CEAs? And the reason we have CEAs is the charter amendment passed in 2004. And that charter amendment said very simply, is there capacity? And we are supposed to be certifying permanent capacity available when those students arrive. That would suggest that every time we certify there's capacity or we issue a CEA, we will have permanent capacity for those children. The second half of this is if we can't say yes, then the choice is they go back to the original government, they get their approval, and then if there are any other significantly affected governments, they will have to have their approval to go forward. To answer your question about, does that mean we're going to lose all of our fees? We will continue to have impact fees. We will not be collecting CEA fees. But We will not be benefiting from CEA fees anymore anyway, because as we'll get to a little bit later on, the whole problem that we had with House Bill 7103 is that the CEA fees that we collected, that same dollar amount, we had to reduce our impact fees. So we will not be losing any money. We will receive the same amount of money, but developers will have the option that was provided to them in 2004 through that charter amendment that hasn't been exercised. And so we want to make sure, because there has been almost no talk about this, we want to make sure that everybody understands that the buck doesn't stop with Orange County Public Schools. The buck stops with the county and municipalities. There is another avenue, an avenue that they have every right to exercise, and the citizens of Orange County have supported that. Did that fully answer your question?
Not quite, Chair. I understood all of that, and I also understood that this has never been exercised before. So I guess, this is a very high overview slide. What I'm trying to determine is, do we, when it goes through the applicant, and what happened in the intent in 2004 and where we are right now with a pandemic and an economic downturn and a hostile legislature and all those things are different. So within the description or definition of the applicant may seek a joint approval, do we still have any negotiating power or ability to mitigate if we can't approve a CDA, or can the other entities collect that CEA fee, or it wouldn't be a CEA fee, but is there a fee component that could be collected by those other significantly affected local governments to support schools? I think that the legislation is fairly clear. I will tell you, in all the conversations we've had with county staff, I don't believe that they think that there is a way that we can call mitigation something else. Any mitigation, it doesn't matter whether it's a CEA, land contribution, it doesn't matter what form it's in. It's comprehensive, it's sweeping. Any dollars that we collect that are for schools have to be discounted back against impact fees. I'm going to turn to Chris Wilson and let him confirm or correct me. Chris?
Madam Chair, I agree. I definitely agree with that. That's my read as well.
I also want to point out, Vice Chair, the amount of money that we're receiving right now in these CEAs is a very small amount of money.
Yes, this is true.
And so I think to be spending a lot of time on what is a couple $1 million a year,
right.
I'm going to try to keep my editorial comments as limited as possible, but we are so far from what was intended by the charter. I do think, from the standpoint of being reelected and honoring the will of the public, it is important to go back to why we started and what we're supposed to do, and make sure that we're complying. So, and what's, again, lost in all of this is there is another avenue. We'll talk about some of the efforts that would need to take place to provide the development community with the avenue that was supposed to be available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, I know that we've never used the joint process for approval before, and I understand that the easier route was probably just to pay for the CEA, but I'm wondering how cumbersome that route is, if it would expand the timeline for developers to get approval, and why it hasn't been utilized in the past.
I can speak from some experience throughout these past 16 years, 20 years. It wasn't utilized because it was easier to have that quick certainty, pay and go. I think that municipalities, when I look at the ILAs and do not even see a reference other than that's what they recognize, the charter says this, but there's no recognition. I think everybody just assumed this was the easier route, and that's the route they went. In terms of what's the additional time frame, the way I would envision it working is that All significantly affected governments would know early on, as soon as it came through for capacity determination, they'd be notified by Orange County Public Schools, you're significantly affected and we don't have capacity. At that point, if local governments want to work cooperatively, which I think they will on this issue, they jointly advertise so that they can have succession hearings, so that the jurisdiction where the property is, they would have their hearing first, because if they shoot it down, there's no point in going forward. And then it would go to any other jurisdictions to have a second hearing. Those hearings would be, and it's spelled out in the charter, they can be on nothing more than the issue of school overcrowding. They can't bring up any ancillary or other issues. I think there will be times when it will be easy, and I think there'll be times when it will be hard, and I think that's the way it should be. We have a situation right now in Ocoee where a school is about 10% overcrowded, and a development is going to generate, I don't know, 7 or 13 more students. And we are suffering through this recession, turning into a depression situation. I think that's a case where Ocoee would probably approve that development. And I think if Orange County had the ability, we're going to talk about the problem Orange County has right now in a minute, but I think Orange County would probably look at that and say, that probably makes sense to go forward with that development. So how this all plays out comes down to the way it should be, people showing up at their local government hearings and saying, this is more important than that, and local government needs to make that decision. It's the way it was always intended to be. I think, I don't think it'll be much slower. I think there will be some times when developments won't be approved because of massive school overcrowding. And I think there'll be other times when it will be approved. Any other questions on that, Member Gallo?
Yes, please. One follow-up question. So on the CEAs, and I believe we have like 17 that are sitting in queue right now. How many of those would require a joint approval process? And what if there is no joint approval process? What happens in no? So say it's just in unincorporated Orange County. We've said, nope, we can't, we don't have capacity. We don't have the ability now to collect CEAs. Would it then just go to the county and the county could approve it? How would that work?
So, and I've stopped us here because I want to make sure everybody followed that there was this other path. As I mentioned, there is a problem right now in the county comp plan that prevents, even if it's just a project that impacts schools that are only in Orange County, that only have unincorporated Orange County students. Member Gould would probably be the greatest example. Horizons West, some of those schools out there don't have significantly affected local governments. So in those cases, normally, Orange County could just move forward and make that decision. But we have a provision in their comp plan that prevents them from doing that right now. What was the rest of your question, Member Gall? I'm sorry.
That was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I checked with Stephen, and he can't tell us for certain right now exactly how many are pending with the county, but I'm quite certain that all of them right now are pending because they don't have an avenue forward. We will talk about timing and how long it would take for that avenue to open up. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. But I felt like throughout this that maybe the board and the public wasn't aware that there's supposed to be another avenue. So thank you. All right, let me see. I don't see any other members, so I will let us get back on track. Is this back to Stephen or Chris? Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so we're going to get back into the history and talk about, this is more into the mitigation under how the CEAs worked. So this language is right out of the CEA, or the ILA 10.6a, where we're saying how is the capital contribution determined? School impact fees are taken into account, and then it's plus any capacity enhancement mitigation required. So how are we coming up with capacity enhancement mitigation? It's the development impact minus the vested students, minus the net school capacity times the total cost. And the key, I think, on this slide is what is the total cost? And the total cost that we're using is the credit portion of the impact fee for each student station created. And then if you put that together with the impact fee, it's the cost of one student station. So quickly, you can see here, the total cost of a student station is $27,053. Thank you. So the revenue credit per student right now under the current impact fee is $5,988, and the net impact per student is $21,065. So what is the credit portion? So the credit portion of the impact fee is basically the future revenues that are expected to come into the school board over time: half-cent sales tax, capital improvement tax, and it did also include mitigation payments received through the CEA process, and that came up with the $5,988 credit portion, and that was what we utilized as the mitigation fee under the CEA program. So how was that money spent? Called to the capital contribution was spent on new capacity paid by developers at plat or site plan approval through the CEA process based on a proportionate share cost per student station and spent directly on the affected school and not district-wide overcrowding. And it was charged only to developers building in overcrowded school zones. So we're coming to a close on the history and the ILAs. And so some of the issues with that mitigation strategy, which has been, this one has been consistent throughout. We can't immediately build permanent capacity. We have to wait for enough students to justify construction and operation of the school. Second, a portion of the mitigation is used to fund temporary student stations until there's justification for a new school. So we're using a portion for that and a portion for permanent capacity. The payment's not received until plat or site plan, so it's delaying the ability to fund new construction until units are online, creating a lag in providing capacity. And then we're not collecting enough funds, or collecting funds early enough in the process to ensure that current school overcrowding is not aggravated. And this is, we're not looking at the actual impact of each developer's project. This was the trade-off for that known quantity of the CEA mitigation costs. So just laying out, these are we've been using this for years, but these are the issues that we've had. So that takes us into, that kind of lays the framework for talking about House Bill 7103 and what its effect on that process is. So you all are probably familiar with it. We're putting it up on the screen for everybody in the public. This is the language from the House bill. It's that last section: any contribution must be applied to reduce any education-based impact fees on a dollar-for-dollar basis at fair market value. So before this went into law.
Chris, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes,
because we highlighted that, but going back to Vice Chair Gould's question,
yes,
actually, if you read the whole thing, because that's where kind of the sweeping language, can we just go through the whole language there?
Yes.
Okay.
The local government must credit against the collection of the impact fee any contribution, whether identified in a proportionate share agreement or other form of exaction, related to public education facilities, including land dedication, site planning, design, or construction. Any contribution must be applied to reduce the education-based impact fees. So that would be, that is very broad, and it is any. And it is anything that any money that comes in that goes to the schools.
And Vice Chair Gould, I want to come back to you because it was a really important question that you asked. When Laura was here and we had the meeting with county staff, Laura tried to find ways to view this language and to keep things moving. And it was a very beneficial meeting. We have to recognize at the end of the day, impact fees are fees that the county commission collects, not us. They are authorized to create impact fees and collect impact fees. They remit them to us, but it's their ordinance. It's something they control. And at the end of the day, they have to be comfortable with any legal positions we take. I don't disagree with their opinion, but we were all looking at ways to try to be creative, to buy some time to figure out what to do. So I did want to share that with you as well. I don't think we have anybody from the county on the line, but they've been at the table, as you know, every step of the way. And it's so important that we be in lockstep with our thinking on this. So back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait.
Oh.
Pam, Member Gould,
Yeah.
let me recognize you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, and in addition to your conversations, I had similar with not only Laura, but since with Amy and Chris about that creativity and trying to figure this out. But I just think it's important that we highlight that wherever we can, because it's very confusing for our constituents. It's even confusing for people who are in the not so much the developers, but in the construction community. They get kind of crossways with what the rules and the law is, and I get pushback on this still for people that don't fully understand it.
No, I completely understand what you mean. It is confusing, and it certainly looks like we're the obstacle. And I'm hoping through this presentation that anybody watches will learn and understand why we are just a piece of the puzzle, but not the final decision maker, or at least we weren't until the legislature created House Bill 7103. And now we want to get ourselves back on the track that was created by the charter, and whatever other tools we might have that might help along the way. So we'll get to that still, but it's so important that we all understand this as well as we can, so that when you're talking to people, Vice Chair, and I'm talking to people, and Melissa, because I think the three of us hear it the most, we can explain it as well as humanly possible. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some actions that have been taken, Some action have been taken. So before the law went into effect, the school board chair on June 11, 2019, with direction from the board, sent a letter to the governor pointing out the impact of this new law and requesting that he veto it. It went into effect July 1st, 2019. During the 2020 legislative session, OCPS staff worked with Orange County staff, members of the development community, to offer language to address the impacts from House Bill 7103. There was lots of efforts put into that, lots of different language was discussed. And although that was the case at the end of the day, it was all taken out and there was no legislative fix created. And in fact, there was some additional language added, making impact fees transferable between projects. So issues that we face because of 7103, because we've heard, well, if you just keep going with CEAs and give 100% credit. So what happens if we do that is that we would receive the fees, the CEA fees. However, the impact fees would be reduced by the amount of the CEA fees received, thereby eliminating any additional mitigation. And the problem there is that the CEA, if we enter one, is supposed to certify capacity, but we're not receiving any additional money in a CEA under the House bill. So as it says at the bottom, in fact, it reduces the amount of impact fee dollars collected, lengthening the time before there's funding for new permanent capacity. And we have some slides that'll show that, I think, in a little better detail. So here is a single family residential unit, pre-House bill. You can see the impact fee, $8,784. The mitigation fee would be $2,497. And the school board would have collected $11,281. So we're starting with that on this slide. Total cost of a single family home, the $11,281. So pre-House bill, we would collect the impact fee, $8,784. We collect the mitigation fee of $2,497. And total, we get, you can see, the $11,281. So post-House bill, you can see there's the impact fee, $8,784. There's the CEA fee, $2,497. But now we have to give a credit. So now we credit $2,497 against the impact fees. So in the post-House bill, you can see the result of that is that we actually get $6,287 in impact fees and $2,497 in a CEA fee. And the most we get was what we used to get as an impact fee, $8,784, where part of that is the mitigation fee. And this really is the impact that we got as a result of the House bill.
Can you go back one slide, if you could? So when you see this and you realize, team, that we will only get impact fees, the value of impact fees, regardless. If you are a new home being built and you're already vested, you're going to pay $8,784. If you're building in an area with grossly overcrowded schools, you're going to pay $8,784. There's no difference. The only difference is the account that they go into, but they're essentially the same amount of money being paid, the same amount of money being received. And the reason this is particularly problematic, if we want to say, well, we'll just go ahead and count that CEA as if we have capacity, is one, as Chris pointed out, there's no additional mitigation. But two, what you're saying is that no matter the project, no matter how extreme the case, we're going to just collect the impact fees. So this whole idea of saying schools are overcrowded, now let's do a CEA so that we get the same amount of money, and now we're going to tell our citizens, oh, everything's okay, we mitigated it. It just doesn't pass the straight face test at all. I think even today with what we're doing, when you realize that we're supposed to be ensuring that the capacity is there when the students arrive, and yet we're not doing it, and we're collecting the total cost of the permanent student station, but the real cost to us is more than the permanent student station, because we have to put portables out there in our schools because we're not collecting the money soon enough. So if we have portables on a school site for 2 or 3 years until we get the money, where's the money coming from the portables? It's coming from the same money that we needed to build the classroom. So that means that we're not collecting enough money right now, even to pay for the portables and the classroom. And even if we were, we would still be late. And to pretend that we're doing something and to go through a process where we know at the end of the day, we're not collecting anything more than we're collecting from every other property, regardless of where they build, it's not honest. It's not something that I could possibly ever support. And it's not a legislative rule that we can agree or disagree with. This was the mandate of the citizens, the electorate, who trusted us and put us in this office. And they're trusting us right now to tell them the truth. And the truth is, this doesn't work. As uncomfortable as it is for the development community, we also have to remember there are parents and there are students who want answers and representation. And the alternative of giving them representation is they get to show up in a meeting, and cities and the county will have to decide case by case. And I think we have to give them good, accurate information to make those decisions. So let me see, am I missing any board members before we move on? I think we're good. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, and just to revisit as we wrap up the House Bill 7103 discussion, the school board's role through the entire time period is discussed is to advise local government whether or not capacity exists, and local governments is to weigh the interests of the new development and growth against the school board's ability to provide that capacity. So, in summary on House Bill, there are not available terms under which OCPS staff can recommend the school board approve CEAs to certify capacity, and therefore alternative options must be considered. So now we'll move to the next part of our presentation and discussion, which is available approaches. So we'll talk a little bit more about the joint approval process, talk about updates on school impact fees, targeted rezonings, and borrowing from capital renewal funds. So we've hit on the charter several times, and we're back here again as available today to be used for the Orange County Charter. It can go forward to the significantly affected local governments for approval. Because CEAs are not an alternative at this time, this is an available approach that can be used by the developers and local governments and the school. And if we go forward one slide, I'm going to bring you back to this original slide that we went through on the capacity determination workflow, and you can see the gray box on the bottom are still there. They've been there this whole time since 2004. It's just never been utilized. And so where we're at is saying we allow the charter to work as it was designed and approved by the voters. And as Madam Chair pointed out, Orange County has a comp plan policy that they would need to change in order to allow the county to exercise the responsibility provided in the charter. I'll turn it over to Stephen to talk about the impact fee.
Thanks, Trace. So the next option, and this really relates back to the fact that, post House bill, in reality, we are only collecting impact fees, is that we do on a regular basis have an update to our impact fees based off of current school construction costs, student generation for each type of project, depending on the timeline, that's occurring at the county. And our last update for the impact fees was actually done in 2016. The consideration for adjusting impact fees definitely can be stemmed not only that we do have to review our impact fees on a regular basis per statute, but also for the fact that we're removing the mitigation we have been receiving from the CEAs. Our impact fees have actually historically considered the mitigation revenue received in the fee calculation, which overall reduces the fee across the county. The rate that the development in an overcrowded school, as the chair mentioned before, is the same rate that is paid the same rate than a house that's being constructed in an area where schools haven't been over capacity in years. So there was an equitable consideration there where the mitigation being received helped reduce the fee overall because we're getting that extra input for the overcrowded school areas. Today, we are working with impact fee consultants to review and quantify additional costs relating to the overcrowding of schools and to quantify any credits that are unrelated to new residential development. And though this is going to update an impact fee study update that we finalized last year, it was kind of ready to go to the county for final approval. However, that did not get adopted, and this process, post House bill, taking a look at these extra funds or extra costs and data to help us quantify the lack of mitigation we're receiving. We're undertaking that now so we can bring that forward again. Now, mentioned before, a negative to this is that the impact fee is increased for all permits and not borne by the developers creating the impacts in the overcrowded school zones, and may not provide enough revenue to eliminate the need for other options down the line.
Thank you, Stephen. The only comment I would make, I think we can say, I'm pretty sure we can say conclusively that it won't. We have to look at our CIP, but I don't think that we can get all overcrowded schools in our 3-year plan that have potential new development, even with the increased impact fees. And I think we need to update them. Obviously, the timing is awful right now, but when we get through this, we need to update them. But this is an avenue to increase some of the revenue we take in, and by increasing, we can have more schools built sooner, and that'll provide some relief, but it won't solve the whole problem. So next slide.
All right. The next slide is more of a short-term solution just to help alleviate the issue of overcrowding schools with the existing capacity that we have already. So this would be targeted rezonings to really take a look at school zones and their adjacent zones to see if there can be any movement of students to help at least alleviate the overcrowding at the schools that we have today. Now, just an example that I hear from quite often. Right now, I know Timber Creek, as of the May 15th enrollment summary, is over capacity by 844 students. Meanwhile, East River is under capacity by roughly 1,000. Having that shift the students, while it may not be popular and may have some other analysis that needs to be done to see if that's option we can execute, could relieve the overcrowding situation on a temporary basis with the capacity that we already have. But of course, this needs to be discussed much further before anything is even implemented or brought on the table. And last short-term option, it could be to borrow capital renewal funds. This was something that was brought forward to the school board and approved by board resolution in 2015 and 2017 for some relief and renovation projects. While the option was there and approved, the actual funds were never transferred because the funding actually became available for those program schools. That's something that will need to be discussed further with our facilities and fiscal staff, as well as consultation with COVE, because that is a major shift of funds that needs to have some more analysis done to see what can be used appropriately, if not at all, or however we need to take a look at it before that option can also be seriously considered. And if there are no questions on the approaches, we can move to the applications that we have in today that are post-House Bill, so post-July 1st of 2019. So that was mentioned briefly before. Oh.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Member Byrd? I'm sorry. No, let me back up.
Yeah.
Member Gallo, Member Gould, then Member Byrd. Member Gallo, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a few questions on the impact fees. So it was mentioned that the impact fees didn't get adopted that we did in 2016. Was that because we didn't submit it to the county commissioners?
I believe it was updated in 2016.
Right.
Are you referring to a 2018 study?
Correct. So we did have our study in 2018 that we started. There was a draft report ready for and a draft list of impact fees that was ready to go in the summer of last year, but that didn't progress forward to the county commissioners due to a lot of this, but also now that we can get this additional data analysis done, that we can relook at that and bring it forward again.
So, Member Gallo, if I can clarify, I think we actually had a work session on the impact fee study, I believe, since we've been on the board. And after House Bill 7103 passed, and this was with Laura still here, she felt that we needed to re-look at the credit portion because we really we're not getting that added revenue. So it went back to the consultant. And then in the course of all that we've been working on, we've also been trying to figure out, is there a way, and I think this goes back to Vice Chair Gould's question, is there some other way that we haven't thought of by which we can take those revenues in? So we also tasked the consultant with exploring that as well. So we've come through all of this. We don't have any solutions. In spite of the effort to get there, and of course now we're in the middle of this pandemic, and bringing forward an impact fee with higher rates is, we want to make sure. Staff want to make sure everybody knows what options are there. Some of them are probably more or less viable at the particular moment in time. Back to you, Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a brief follow-up question, and if someone could refresh my memory, what was the suggested increase to the impact fees from the 2016 study?
Stephen, do you have that? It's actually a 2018 study. So we adopted it in 16. We could have readopted it after 2018. Do you remember the amount? It was in a slide.
For a single family unit, I can approximate it to be about 9,300, up from the 8,700 that we have today. So it was roughly $1,000 increase for a single family unit.
Does that help?
Thank you.
And
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I see Mr. Wilson looking, because at one point we had a slide that we, I think, took to the end, and I'm not sure if you can find it quick enough, but it was in that magnitude. But there is an alternative way of calculating that would take that fee even higher. But we have a process we go through with that also. We have an impact fee advisory committee, a joint committee of the county and the school district, and nothing would come to us before it went to them. So anybody listening to this, I don't want anybody panicking, thinking we're going to try to sneak something on the agenda. So there's a process involved in that. So that was Member Gallo. Vice Chair Gould?
If you could go back to your slide that showed the difference between Timber Creek and East Colonial. Yeah, that one. So I'll tell you, you don't need to study this. I'll tell you what the answer to this is. You think people hate overcrowded schools? Temporarily rezone them for a year or two, and you'll find out they hate that more. So I think, you know, we can spend time on this, but having done a lot of clever rezonings and targeted rezonings to try to just manage growth on the west side of town, and I'm sure others can speak to this too, when people have to move their families 2 and 3 times, it is probably the thing they absolutely hate the most, the absolute most. So that just made me chuckle when you put that up. You talked about the fees and what the costs were, but I think, and you may get into this later, but I think it's important to talk about how much it costs to build an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school, and how much on average we get in impact fees per project when you're talking about that, because it's not like we can collect a project and build a school or a wing, because you don't want to build wings and make schools larger. We want to have neighborhood schools. We want to go where the growth is. So I think we have to talk about those two things in tandem, and maybe later in the presentation, you're showing, you know, what we need to bring up, and if you are, I'll wait. But if not, I think this is an important time to talk about that when we were talking about the loss per student station without the CEA, and now trying to go into a discussion about, you know, impact fees.
Okay, so this presentation does not include an analysis of how much of our actual CIP budget for new schools and relief comes from impact fees versus other dollars. We can certainly get that information to you. We do know that historically, we know what the cost of a student station is. That's where the impact fee dollar comes from. That's where that number comes from. And we do know that we lose, for a single family home, we lose 22% because of the credit. So we know that we are always 22% under what it would cost to build a classroom or a student station, let me put it that way. If we never had to have portables, we know that. So we know where that's 22. But we also know that any way we try to collect that 22, we will have to turn around and give it back.
I have that, Chair, but could we have the staff answer that question too, please, about the cost of schools, and they know off the top of their head what
actually
percent, almost, because Laura did an extensive analysis of this for me last year, and we presented in the community. We have that at our fingertips.
Okay, Mr. Thorpe, do you have that at your fingertips?
I do not have that at my fingertips, but what I do have is taking a look at the adopted resolution for the capital renewal transfer. And I know this is historical data, but you know the resolution did state for the 3 elementary schools that it was roughly an $18 million per school project. Now, and then for K-8s is roughly $38 million. Now, I can't tell you because it's not the particular area that I'm an expert in. But I'm sure that has increased a little bit over time, but I'm sure that's kind of the ballpark.
Vice Chair Gould, I'm sorry, I thought you also wanted to understand relative to how much impact fee revenue we have against the cost.
Both,
Yeah.
with both, which I know there is a slide that someone on staff could access pretty easily because we've brought it out to the community. And yes, it would be, maybe 12 months old, but those ratios haven't really changed. We're looking at going forward, they may change.
So Vice Chair.
And the high school is about $100 million. So that puts in perspective, I think, for the whole board. These are very important dollars, but it's not as quick in growth areas where you rely a little more heavily on the impact fees.
So Vice Chair, just to defend Mr. Thorpe just for a minute, if Mr. Kelly were here as a part of this, I think he would probably be able to answer those questions very quickly. I'm sure the whole board knows, but we lost Laura, we lost Julie. Who else did we lose? We lost one other person in the.
Jamie.
Yeah. So we have almost a whole new planning division. So I know you're right. We have that, but Mr. Thorpe is sitting here with his laptop and he doesn't have it right now. So you're absolutely right. And we will make sure the whole board sees that. And if I think if any of us had anticipated that question, we probably should have anticipated that question, but we didn't. So we don't have it today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. We have Member Byrd.
Yeah, I can wait till the end of the presentation, actually, for my comments.
I think we're pretty close to the end, but that's fine. Let me take, I have Member Gordon and I have Member Colbert. Member Byrd, do you still want to wait?
Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay, no
Thank
problem. Member Gordon, then Member Colbert.
Right. Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Hear you loud and clear.
I'm just sitting here chuckling because you all are asking questions of Mr. Stephen, and Mr. Stephen is in the place of Julie Salvo. Yes. And I forgot who's in the place of Laura. Who's the attorney in the place?
Arriving soon.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'm trying to let you all know. We are asking legality. We're asking legal questions of the person that has really just helped us to get through these CEAs, which is really Stephen, which has done an outstanding job in trying to brief all of us and keep us up to par. But he would not have all of the answers that the legal counsel for that facilities department would have. So we miss them all dearly, but we wish them all well because they all have done a great job. And I think Stephen came on board, so we told him we call him the new Julie. Okay. But even though he's doing a great job. My question, Madam Chair, that I'm looking at, I agreed with Member Gould, and that was my question. She pretty much hit on it, but I'm going to hit on it a little bit more with slide 37 and 38. If he could turn to that moment, right. Okay, I know that this is addresses short-term overcrowding, but I needed to ask Dr. Jenkins. She doesn't have to answer it now, but I think we were looking into all of our schools that were under capacity because that was one thing. You know, we built it for one thing, and yet we are operating several of our schools without. They only gave these two examples, but there are other schools out there. So I don't want us to just look at that and say, oh my God, we need to move the people from here to there. As Member Gould said, we've already done that. And not only have we done it once or twice, we probably have done it a couple of times. So I would like Dr. Jenkins, if possible, to let us know the other schools that may be able to help us address this, even if it's a short term, how many other schools, and we know that there are several, that will fall into this area that are under capacity. And then we also need to know the other schools, because I haven't seen an updated list yet, other than what Dr. Carol McGow sends to us. And, you know, that's basically your student enrollment, okay? But we really need to go back now and look at the overcrowding. Dr. Jenkins mentioned this in her pandemic report to the board that she did and how it may affect us with the social distancing and how many students we can have within that classes. So she basically addressed it. So I will assure you that I know that her staff have looked at every school in the district to see where they are under capacity or if they're over capacity. So that was my area there. And I was so glad that Member Gould talked about it. If you've never been in a targeted rezoning, the best ones are the ones where there are no houses. And Mrs. Jacobs, we worked with you, Chair Jacobs, for 16 years, building your community. You didn't have a community over there. So I have to go back and let you know how new your community is and how vastly it is growing, and it will overcrowd our school system. It is already overcrowded because of what we are doing there. So that's going to be a major area. We need to really hurry up and get on the ball with the targeted zoning before they build. And that is what Carol McGow and her team had been trying to do. You know, to target it. We did a thing that we called cleaning up the lines, so that when the people get in that community, there will be no argument. The argument comes that Member Gould was explaining to you, when these people have moved and somebody built and they moved and then here come the builders and they moved again. That is what creates chaos for this board. It becomes very chaotic. It is not a happy moment. And I pray for you all that will be going through this, because as fast as they're growing on your side, you are going to feel the thrust of it. So we really need to get on it and just see how we can go back, and also before Dr. McGow leaves or her team or whatever, look at where we can go in and do these targeted rezonings now before you bill up to Lake County, you bill up to Osceola County, and you bill up to the surrounding, those Polk counties they call them, in Orange, you know, but they have the Polk County on one side. So when you got the 3 counties that's just growing out there, because when we were looking to get the high schools property and try to build those, they just really weren't there. So I wanted to point that out, that this is something you guys will be confronted with on the north side out in Melissa area. And we let that go because they only have that one little high school out there, a Pop High. It's not going to be able to hold everybody. So, you know, getting in there, and they have already been all the way to Mount Dora, you know, and there may be, well, it has to be a shared, like we had considered with Osceola one time, and also Dr. Jenkins had worked with us where we were even sharing with Lake County on that Mount Dora side. So it might have to be some sharing of schools as these students get older and grow. So if you could go through, and I know it says it does not increase revenue, and we know you're going to need additional discussion because that's going to come from your parents and the home builders that's going to be living over there. If he would go to the next slide for me, I just wanted to point out the borrowing of the capital renewal funds and how we did it. I am so glad we did as a board. I don't know how many of you, when you guys came on board, but I know Ms. Colbert, Member Gould, and myself. I don't think, did you all come on in 2017? When did you come on, Madam Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. I came on 2018.
So you missed it.
Yeah, I missed it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
found it.
Okay, I know you did. Well, I'm not worried about you or any of the board members because I know you try to keep up at least with your community. I'm not worried about you, Madam Chair, because as Dr. Jenkins said, you bring a great deal of knowledge to this discussion because you had to live through it, and you were very instrumental as a county commissioner in getting information to us to let us know what was coming ahead. And a lot of our individual commissioners did that for us, and we were very helpful. You didn't have to do it, but you did, and we appreciate you for that. So what I'm saying is that board resolution for 2015 and 2017 for the relief and renovation project, I know we got to go back and take a look at that. And then we know we don't bother anything that Cove is dealing with because that's pretty much in goal. But yes, that is something that this board, the present board, is definitely going to have to take a look at. And I would try to ask you all, while you are getting this, I know you don't have much time. And right now, what we have coming up, will be our budget. And the June and July meetings and the September meetings are going to be so important. But some kind of way, Madam Chair, if you can get a meeting in to look at this, because you don't know what the continuity of your next board is going to be, okay? So even if it's something different, you're going to have at least one new member, okay, on that board. And there's a possibility you may have more than one. You really don't know. So I would try to gather with this awesome presentation that they're doing today. I would really be trying to gather everybody together so you can begin to think, where can we go from here, and work with the superintendent to see how we can be able to do what we need to do. Because the borrowing of the Capital Renewal Fund may be a little difficult, other than Dr. Jenkins mentioned something very good the other day. We don't know what the pandemic is going to do to us. We may have to go back in, and where we were going to build, we may have to go back and re-look at that again, because we do have to have a place for the students. And where we have not built, but yet we were going to build. So if you don't look at it now, they're building. They're going to keep building. The construction people are still building. So I'm just trying to say, what the information that they're giving us, these are options that you cannot take lightly. And that 2015, 2017 relief and renovation project resolution was something else to look at. So I just wanted to bring in those little 2 points on those 2 slides thus far, but you're doing a very good job in getting us through this. And I thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, and to our consultants that's bringing this to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. I actually was searching through BoardDocs and found the resolution, I think 2015 or 17. And I was like, wow, that was very creative. So Dr. Jenkins and I have discussed it. We've broached the topic with Cove, but a long ways to go. There's so much uncertainty right now that I do want to assure everybody that these the staff put together all potential options. Some of them may or may not be feasible at different points in time. You had a specific question for Dr. Jenkins. Let me check with Dr. Jenkins about areas where there may be capacity. Dr. Jenkins, I don't know if you have that information, but I also see Stephen is raising his hand, so perhaps he has some help he can offer us. Dr. Jenkins first?
I don't have it with me. We'll certainly get it to the board.
Okay.
Stephen, do you have it?
I actually wanted to talk about the construction costs.
Okay, we'll go back to the constructions, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. Go ahead.
So I did get a little bit of a information update, and this doesn't answer the question fully, but this is just the general cost for the construction itself, not acquisition of property. But for elementary schools is $26 million, middle schools is $47 million. The high schools are roughly $115 million, and then our K-8s are $49. So that's something that going forward to take a look at as far as what we need to do for relief schools. But I don't have any additional information about impact fees versus the construction costs at this current point.
Okay, thank you. Member Colbert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a quick point on how the staff is being very creative trying to come up with solutions. But as I look at all 4 of these potential solutions, it's really a Sophie's choice. And the public does need to understand how difficult this is. Member Gould made the point about temporary or short-term targeted rezonings, the strain that causes on families, especially when, the public, the community, and we prefer neighborhood schools. But when I think about borrowing from the Capital Renewal Fund, my concern there is that we could end up with some functional equity problems. If we are delaying capital renewal projects, borrowing from that fund, where we could have aging HVAC systems or other things that were in that plan to use for new construction. That's a tough choice as well. So all of these are just very, very difficult choices, and none of them are good choices. I just want to highlight how difficult any one of these approaches would be. And yes, we are going to have to do something, but none of these are optimal for our students or our community.
Thank you, Member Colbert. Let me clarify one thing. The Capital Renewal Fund, when we first discussed this idea, had such a huge balance in it. And of course, we are accruing these funds every year so that 10, 15, 20 years down the road when, as you mentioned, HVAC, roof, whatever needs to be replaced. But as those funds sit and aren't being used, the thought was, and this was the thought in 2015 and 17, was to borrow funds that you are not going to need. Those are funds that are just sitting, accruing some interest. And to repay them in a timely fashion. There was, I think, a date when it had to be repaid with revenues you knew you had coming in, and repay them with interest. So I did want to clarify that, lest anybody think that we're talking about roofs versus, classrooms. Now, having said that, with what has happened with sales tax revenues, whole nother ball game. And that's why I'm saying this presentation has been in the works since the ideas, the options, trying to come up with ideas since before the pandemic. Everything has to be reassessed based on where are we today. And
yes, and you read my mind, because at that time we were certain of the revenue that was coming in and we could project it, and that has all changed. So
exactly
my thought process. Thanks.
Exactly. And the same thing is true with impact fee revenues, but the reliance that we have on sales tax revenue, that is going to be hit very hard. We know that. And I think all bets are off right now. So let me go to Member Gould, back to Vice Chair Gould. And I have not forgotten you, Member Byrd.
Thank you so much. So in follow up to the question I was asking, I actually found two of the slides from July 30th, 2019 presentation that we had done to the community. And it follows your most recent conversation with Member Colbert pretty closely. So in our capital projects funds, this is overall, not per school, but more than half of our capital projects fund is funded by the halfpenny sales tax. That was as of 7/30/2019. Impact fees were 11% of the capital budget revenue that pays for new schools, and property tax comprised 37% of the capital budget that pays for debt service, district-wide capital buses, ancillary facilities, et cetera, and probably some of the new schools going forward. And when you looked at our total capital funds that are spent, additional schools, site acquisition, and portables are about 18-20% of our total capital budget. So just to put the impact fees, they're very important for moving us forward. There's no question. We can't finish out schools. We can't get there as fast as we need to get there. But with the impact to the halfpenny sales tax and the impact fees, we have a lot to think about.
We do. Vice Chair, I don't know anybody who does a better job of keeping track of data and information. I sit next to you every meeting, and she is able to pull up budgets, and sometime I would really like to learn that skill. But in the meantime, if you don't mind, give me the date of that presentation so that I can hunt for it. And then really, if you do have, if there's like a key to how you keep track of so much information, I sure would love to know it. It's amazing.
Well, this I have to refer to so often. I have in a binder that I carry in my car.
Okay.
Because I have to do it so often. But it was called School Siting and Funding, and it was 7/30/19.
Okay. Wonderful. Amazing. But it's not just that binder. It's just, I remember Covert, you were the same way. I mean, it's just you, I know you guys have more experience, but you also are really great about keeping track of, especially budgetary stuff. So let me go to, let me finish the presentation. We're very close. And then I'm going to go to Member Byrd. Stephen or Chris, who's on deck? Stephen?
Yep. Okay. And to round out this presentation, I just want to give a brief update as to the status of our current capacity determinations post-House bill. So this is everything that we've received after July 1st of last year to May 8th of this year, because we haven't had too many come in due to the pandemic. But so today we have 17 pending CEA applications. The majority of these are in Orange County, with a smattering in our local jurisdictions. And at the end, I'll show you a map of where these are located throughout Orange County. But these are projects that have been on hold either since July 1st, or more recently to the early this year. Additionally, since July 1st of last year, we have had 25 passing capacity determinations, and this is, again, as of May 8th. The bulk of these are in Orange County, with Ocoee, Orlando, Winter Garden, and Apopka also being included. And this map shows the combination of the pending CEA applications combined with our capacity approval letters that we've sent out. You'll see that the majority of the approvals are within our Horizon West area. A lot of this is based off of the relief that we do have scheduled in the next 3 years in our CIP. Additionally, we do have a lot of these projects are on our east side, the Goldenrod 417 area towards UCF. And then additionally, you can see the pending applications are at our north central, northwest part of the county, as well further to the south along our I-Drive, Hunters Creek, South Chase area. And with that, that does conclude Chris and my presentation, and we could definitely open up some comments from Dr. Jenkins and the school board.
Thank you. Let's hear from Member Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. I have some comments before I make those. I have a question. So we have 17 projects on hold. My question is, where does this put us with those 17 projects? If we do the dual approval process, or we just let them go, we say we don't have capacity, let it go, and they do the dual approval. What are the developments looking at as far as, or do we know what they're looking at as far as a comparison of what delay that would look like for them compared to what they normally would have with the CEA with us if they had paid if we didn't move ahead at this point? Like, how much longer are we at? If we tell them to do that, is that throwing them another 6 months down the road for their projects? Do you have any estimation on that?
Yeah, I'm going to turn to Chris in a second. I do want to clarify. I want to keep coming back to this. Our role, at the end of the day, our role is to answer the question: do we have capacity? It's not really what to tell them to do. Mm-hmm. They've gotten so used to once they come to us, then they're good to go. So I'm going to turn to Stephen, who I think has an idea of what he thinks the additional time would be involved.
So for this question, this does go back to the fact that this joint approval process has existed since day one. And I think it just has not been a discussion that's occurred between the local jurisdictions. It's as serious as it could be. But if I was a local jurisdiction and they had, in this project, had a opportunity for a dual or the joint approval process, assuming that OCPS can identify that the project does have a significantly affected local government based off of our data, Ideally, and I know a lot of jurisdictions will do this, probably will run more concurrently than anything, to have the main jurisdiction have their public hearing, and then maybe a month down the line, you could have your other significantly affected local jurisdiction have their school meeting essentially. So I don't think it's too much of an extra step. I know that's a step that I think all the jurisdictions need to kind of discuss and come up with a game plan and adopt some sort of process. But if my thought is probably not too long of an addition compared to a regular CEA process.
So, Member Byrd, there's two parts to the answer. So let me start with the best situation. If the county's comp plan provided for the county to approve of a land use or zoning without capacity, which it doesn't right now, that's a problem that needs to be addressed if the dual option or the joint approval is going to work. But let's assume that takes place. Then what currently happens is we get the determination of capacity. At that point, we know if they're sufficiently significantly affected, as Stephen just pointed out. At that point, we can notify all the governments. At that point, if there's no capacity, they're not going through the CEA process. So the time that we spend calculating and negotiating and sending paperwork back and forth and getting it on our agenda before it goes to the county commission and even gets scheduled for the county commission, all of that is gone. So in one sense, that savings of time, I think, is probably greater than the additional time of having back-to-back hearings between one local jurisdiction and another. The bigger problem is that in 2008, and I think we kind of went over this fairly quickly, but in 2008, the Orange County Commission adopted a change to their comp plan that appears to prohibit them from approving any zoning or comprehensive policy plan amendment that doesn't have capacity or a CEA. And I've gone back and watched the hearing. There was no reference to that. I'm puzzled by that being in there, but that serves as a major impediment, because that means that until they can't waive their comp plan, or they'll have to change their comp plan, which is okay. They can do that. That's not a referendum issue. That's not a legislative issue, but there is a process, and that process takes about 3 months. And that process has not been started yet. So until the county moves forward, chooses to or not to move forward and change their comp plan, that joint approval process that was contemplated in 2004 can't function for the county. And if you have, in the case of Apopka and that development that we had issues with and ultimately worked through, that would have had to come to the county commission, but the county commission could not have jointly approved it either under their comp plan. So one impediment here to the joint approval process that nobody's exercised is an impediment created by a comp plan policy in 2008 that needs to be reversed in order for that to be available. If that's not clear, please ask me, because...
No, that's clear. I'm just wondering why all this time has gone by and why they have not talked about that.
I can't answer that. I do know that we've had conversations with the county. It's not ours to do or ours to ask, but I have asked if they have looked at that, and I think that they're seriously considering that. But it creates it again. It was never intended. The charter amendment was never intended to put the school district in the position of being able to veto land use and zoning, because that's not our role. It was intended to put us in the position of providing the capacity information so that the local governments could weigh those competing interests. That's their job. Our job is build schools for kids, educate kids, take care of kids. That's what we're elected to do, not decide which is more important. And I think it's extremely important for us to remember what we were elected to do. But at the same time, I think it's important for local governments to be able to do the job they were elected to do. That was taken away, I think, inadvertently by a single sentence that got put into the comp plan policies that I could argue could be interpreted different, but I understand why they've interpreted it the way they have. So that's where we are. It's a 3-month, probably maximum time frame to fix that.
Okay. And the reason I just asked about that is obviously, you know, I feel as I think everyone else does that I want to get us out of the way. You know, I'm like you. I'm frustrated that we're in this position where the school board is looked at as the ones that have stopped and halted all this development. And you know, it's personal for me too, because I grew up in a construction family. I understand what it's like for these families, that what they're facing now with this pandemic of uncertainty. And I know what that feels like when the economy slows down, and you know, it's scary for people. So I am all for doing whatever we can do, like you guys are, to get out of the way and let these projects move forward as fast as they can, because our economy needs it and our families need it. And not to mention, we need those impact fees from those developments. I think that those developments, all those developments on that list, those impact fees will obviously help us get our schools online quicker. But you know, I've been, as the member of the POPCA Northwest Orange area, I've been keen on this issue since I was elected. Finding relief for those first 2 schools was my top priority when I was elected in 2018. After that was handled, I had issues with the CEAs, CMAs from the beginning. I pulled them off the consent agenda to start a discussion about it. That night, I even said in my statements, I said, we cannot continue to go on like this, where we take fees in areas where the schools are already overburdened without a plan that is acceptable to our entire community. And putting the kids in portables was not acceptable to the families in my community, which they were in for years. So, you know, at that time, I, like many others, I think, felt like there was a problem with the CEA process, and it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, and it wasn't reducing or solving the overcrowding problem. It was at best funding our portables. So I feel like, you know, that's why over all these past few months, it's been so hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that those fees, which are relatively insignificant fees, we're causing all these other problems and stopping these developments, where getting in the way of these developments that would have brought us more money in the long term through impact fees and whatnot. I want this situation to provide us. I think it provides us a real unique opportunity here, and I think we've gotten kind of started tonight. And I like what I've seen. I like that the staff has come up with solutions and they've brainstormed, and I think the solutions they've listed are a good start. I think that everything should be considered, even if it is uncomfortable and unpopular. I think that we as a community could probably come up with even more solutions if we work together. And this is kind of what I've said before, that I think that there's some important ideas that have been left off that list. And I've said this before, like adjusting our siting agreements. I think that that's a big discussion that we still need to have. If we could build smaller schools we could build them faster, we could build them cheaper. If we're not required to build 60-acre high schools, and we could build smaller specialty schools, or even smaller community built schools. if we didn't have those siting agreements, that's something that I think would free us up to be able to find real estate faster and solve. But that's just an example of how I think we have to start thinking outside of the box to solve our overcrowding problem. I think we have a real opportunity here, and we've done a great job of trying to keep up with the growth, and that's evident in our aggressive building plan. You know, we build more than any other district in the state of Florida. We've reduced portables by 50%, but it still isn't quite good enough. We still have children in portables, and I know that we have to have some children in portables as we wait to build schools. But I know, and I know other board members probably feel the same way I do, and I know I have community members that do not want their kids in portables. So I think that we still need to work on. I think we need to use this as an opportunity to call on our community to come together and really have some serious discussions about what we can do, because obviously, it's a difficult problem. It's a problem that's not going away. Like Dr. Gordon said, they're still going to come here. They're still going to move here. This area is going to still grow faster than any other area in the state of Florida. So we have to be prepared for it. So I'm hoping that we can, maybe this might spur on these discussions even more, but I'm appreciative of the staff of what they've come up with so far. But I really want to get us out of the way and get these projects moving as fast as they can for our community.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I agree with just about everything you said, except that I do want people to understand that we didn't get in the way, and it's not something that we have the ability to get out of the way. We really need to. We tried to get the law changed, and now I think the best, most viable option is for the charter provision to be able to work, and we don't control that process. I do want to put your mind a little bit at ease. When I came here and started seeing how the CEAs were, the amount of money that we're generating or the lack thereof, and looking further at that, I was concerned, because that was not what I anticipated as a commissioner. When I would see a capacity enhancement agreement and it indicated that the capacity would be there, I was voting for land use and zoning, believing that there was going to be capacity there when those students arrived. And so when I got here, it was, and like you, there was one particular CEA, I won't go into the details, that I asked the superintendent, can we pull this off? Can we back up? Can we look more carefully at this? But what I discovered was that this had all been created through a series of interlocal agreements that the school board in 2008 and in 2011 voted for. And so recognizing these were binding agreements that had been entered into, I did not feel that trying to be against every CEA because it wasn't the way I might have done it was appropriate, because that you don't get to come in as a new board member and overturn agreements that have been entered into. So I think there is an opportunity here too. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at what can be and what can we do from the point where we are. So, and I think the one thing I would say is, if we're going to talk about different school sizes and designs, probably internally talking to the superintendent and the team and understanding and trying to get a handle on what's doable is maybe a good place to start. But I think I love the ideas, because I think it does create more opportunities to build different types of schools that might fit into different places for different students. So anyway, I think they're all great ideas. I'm just hoping we get to the point where more people have a better understanding of how we got here, and what the options are, and what little real choices we have at this point, other than to continue to work together. Let me, Member Gallo, I think I already called on you, but I just want to double check, and then I'm going to go to Member Gordon. Member Gallo, we're good, right?
No, I have some questions.
Okay, Member Gallo.
No, it actually starts with
Oh, it
me
starts,
again.
goes
Sorry.
back to you. Okay, no
Yeah,
problem.
sorry.
Vice Chair, then to Gallo, then to Gordon. Vice Chair, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for this presentation. I mean, we had a lot of chatter through, but I was actually accumulating kind of some other thoughts going forward. So I think we have a unique situation here than ever historically before. I think we have to look at a short-term solution and a long-term solution. And a lot of the things that Member Byrd was talking about are things that we can do over a year or a 2-year, because you can't just pivot. You know, we're not going to stop the construction we have right now and change the site. That all takes time and negotiation with all of our partners. And all the partners are feeling the pinch of this, especially now. It's exacerbated by COVID. But let's put this into context at this point. At this point, we have a huge market challenge. And that market challenge is not just about the seats that we struggle with in overcrowded schools. It's about completion of pathways to make it safe to go to those schools, of crosswalks to get done. If you look at Horizon West, if we cannot figure out how to continue the development, we're stuck where we are right now. If we can't collect impact fees and we can't get very clever with interest and all those things that you were talking about, Chair, with some of the funds that we hold to make up for sales tax, we're going to be in trouble in a lot of different ways and not serving our children well. So I understand the challenges in the normal world of where we are and what we can and cannot do. But are there things within our power to have an emergency order that may change, waive, you know, for those that are in queue right now, anybody who had applied before the law changed and maybe had to go back and forth? I don't know. What is within our purview to do and have a short-term resolution for that? And then the second part is we do need to look at this long-term and how are we going to make up those seats? If impact fees traditionally have only paid 11%, it's always that tail end money of what we need to fund any one of our brand new schools. It's not, you know, if we wait for, let's see, I'm going to be opening how many schools in the next 5 schools in the next few years. 2 of them are high schools. That's $200 million just in the high schools. That's the impact. We couldn't do it just on impact fees alone. So this is a big issue. Long term, we need our development and our community partners. But short term, what is in our ability to do to make sure we don't have anything to do with collapsing another major sector of our economy that we absolutely, in places that have development going, need to keep them going, because I need the sidewalks, I need the crosswalks, I need the roadways, I need all those things finished, that if the developers stop, the county stops, because it's developer partnerships in so many of those areas. So I guess that's a legal question.
Okay, so I will ask that to our legal team.
So we're certifying capacity when we issue a CEA. So I'm not sure that we have the ability to waive that. Or if we did, we would be going forward knowing that we were not in receipt of mitigation funds for the future.
May I clarify? Sorry, Chris. May I clarify?
Sure, of course.
So I don't mean waive the process completely. I think that we have to know what that is and what that capacity is, and bake it in and try to make it up on the impact fees. But is there a way to track that capacity other than the CEA process? Maybe that's a better way to ask it.
I'm looking at Stephen as well, is track the capacity other than through the CEA process. I don't know that we don't have another mechanism. That is one mechanism to mitigate, to allow us to proceed forward to certify capacity so that they can be approved.
I think
Can we create another certification process that gets us, while we're fixing this one, as a very short-term solution, so that it would be like any of the executive orders, you know?
But hang on, the executive orders are honest and transparent. So can we come up with an executive order that says that we're going to say we could have capacity, but we don't? I think it's a good question. I think if there's one thing I was hoping that we would all understand when we were done here, is that we do not own this problem. We have one role, no matter how many people are pestering you and wanting you to fix the problem. Our question was always, do we have capacity, and will we have it? If not, when those children arrive? That was the only question we've ever been asked to answer by the citizens. Forget about the interlocal agreements. That's what the citizens directed us to do, to turn around and say, well, we're gonna waive all of that. If there's a waiving to be done, it needs to be done at the local government level. They have the executive powers. They have the emergency order powers. They have the ability. I don't know that they can legally do it, but if there's a place to do it, that's where it is. We are one stop in this process, and we're not even a required stop under the charter. So if we don't,
and I get that, Chair. I think, though, the way that we have practiced since I have been on the board, we have had a process that comes through, and the county has had a piece of it. Our interlocal agreements have had a piece of it. I'm looking right now at our current situation, not our long-term gain. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I don't think our responsibility begins and ends there at this juncture because of those other things that I just said. We need to make sure that, one, our students aren't suffering because their parents are out of work. Two, that we get that infrastructure put in place for development, very large developments that are already in process, because we have safety concerns right now out there. We have issues out there right now with crosswalks. We have all that connectivity issue. And if this gets delayed an entire year and the county can't fix the charter that fast, because they can't do it through executive order on a short-term basis, what is our short-term solution versus the long-term solution? That's, I might not be articulating it well, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to say. If this was normal times, we'd have to just kind of go through it all, but this isn't normal time.
So let me go to Chris in just a minute. I do want to clarify, the county doesn't need to fix the charter. That goes back out to the public. That is a lengthy process. The county needs to amend their comp plan. That is a 3-month process. That could have been completed many times over right now. It doesn't get completed till it gets started. So you can continue to think that we are the ones who need to solve the problems, and you can continue to take the blame. Or you can understand that we have a question we're asked, do we have capacity? And if not now, can it be mitigated? Unfortunately, the development community wanted a change to the bill, and they got it. They changed the legislation so they could always get credits. They didn't realize that here in Central Florida, that was going to backfire. We didn't create this problem. In my opinion, we don't own this problem. And we can all agree to disagree at the end of the day. But to say we have a pandemic, so we're going to lie to the public and say we have capacity when we don't, and just do it through an executive emergency waiver order, I don't believe that's I don't think that's our job to do.
Well,
I think that's,
and I am not implying we should lie to the public or not track the capacity enhancement. We have to know that impact. We have to know how many kids that any development is going to give us. It gets baked into our generational rate. We have to know that. What I am saying is, what are our short-term solutions to this and impact fees and other things for the people that have been in queue for a period of time, including those that may have started their applications and didn't get them passed for whatever reason, or didn't get them completed prior to the law changing. I am not saying this is forevermore, and I am not saying we hide one darn thing from our public, because we are here to serve them. So don't, and thank you for clarifying the amendment.
Okay.
The town plan versus the.
So clarification, anybody who was in the pipeline and started has been approved. The only ones that are on hold are the ones that came afterwards and were not in the pipeline. There are a few that were in the pipeline and then they pulled and decided not to change their, I think we have one in particular that it was wanting to go forward, then didn't go forward, but everybody else that was in the pipeline got approved. One option that I've asked about is, could we continue? I asked all this past year, could we continue to utilize the language that indemnifies the school district? And my suggestion was that not only does the applicant indemnify us to say, we're going to pay these capacity enhancement fees because we know that we may not move forward without the capacity, without this extra money. So we'll agree to pay it and we will waive any right to come back and sue. But I also thought that it would be helpful if the local government also took the ownership of indemnifying as well. The county will not support any further indemnification agreements past the ones that were in the pipeline. That's been their legal, consistent opinion. Only the ones that were in the pipeline could we put the language in there that they waived their right to come back and argue that they were entitled to impact fee credits. These are the county's impact fees. These are not ours. The fact that we have been in the process, you were not in the process before 2000. You weren't on the radar screen. Mel put you in the process. The charter created one thing, the same thing. What is the capacity? Is it there or not? These interlocals were arrived at because developers wanted certainty of what they were paying. All of it is fair. No, I'm not faulting anybody. Everybody is doing what makes sense. What is not fair is to think that this is a problem that we own and can solve. Chris, let me go to you.
I was just going to point out that any solution, short-term or long-term, it has to be among all of the parties in their local agreement, plus the local government, local governments. So, I mean, that we have to go out and have more discussions to come to those solutions.
So is some sort of a short-term resolution for the folks in the pipeline something we could broach with our interlocal partners while we do solve this in the long term, and the language is tied to, economic conditions, whatever we want to tie it to, or until one or both of us says it's no more?
I am certain that that issue has already been broached, not by us, but by other organizations. That has been broached to the county, which is the appropriate place. The county is they are the emergency management directors for the entire county. The school district does not have that authority. The county has that authority. When I was the mayor of Orange County, I was the emergency management director for the entire county. So it has been broached as an opportunity by executive emergency powers to suspend this process. I have no idea what the county's position is. I don't know if it's legal or not, but I know it's been broached. I think I do think that if as long as we think that we're responsible, there will continue to be great confusion, and it concerns me for us to take responsibility for something we did not create and we cannot fix. But Vice Chair, anything else, and then I'll go to our next speaker.
One clarification on what you think may have been discussed. Is that CEAs only or all impact fees?
I think it was only the CEA process. The CMA process is not an issue. We're processing CMAs because that's not a local charter provision. That is a state requirement. The state has changed it, so we've followed the change in legislation. So as far as I know, but I don't know if it went beyond that. But I think the issue was how to suspend this process temporarily during this crisis, because every job right now is crucial.
That's right.
Same situation we were in after when I came back in after the recession. Totally different arena. The school district didn't appreciate us not collecting the same level of impact fees, but we felt, and it was appropriate when I was mayor of Orange County for me to balance those interests. I was elected to do that as a county commissioner or mayor, but we felt that the need for jobs was was the most important thing.
Right, and this is exacerbated because it hits every industry sector. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. It's just a question of, is that our job or is that the county's job, and who has the authority? The county has, what authority there is in the hands of the county, not in the hands of the school district. I will be honest with you all, because I wasn't watching. I have Pam down here, but I am not sure if I'm going to, I think I'm going to Angie next. Member Gallo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions, but before I begin, I have to say I agree with Member Byrd and Member Pam Gould. Sorry, it's been a long day. I understand that this is not something that we created, and it's not a responsibility, but it has fallen at our doorstep. And when we look back at the funds that we've captured or that we've collected over the last 2 years, as you mentioned previously, Chair, in 2019 it was $1.9 million. In 2018 it was like 3 point something. And when you look at the scheme of how much high school costs or how much a middle school costs to build, and you look at, we've only collected 20 million since the inception of the CEAs. It seems like that I don't know, I feel like that we've gone through a lot for not a whole lot return on our dollars. With that being said, I understand it's not our responsibility, but if it remains here and Orange County decides not to amend their comp plan, and the developers decide to sue, who are they going to sue? Are they going to sue Orange County Public Schools for holding up development, or are they going to sue Orange County government?
They're going to sue Orange County government.
So they won't sue Orange County Public Schools?
They might name us as a party, but we are following the interlocal agreement.
We are.
I don't. I mean, their approvals rest with the local governments of whether or not they give approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, and my next question was, when I had spoke to Laura Kelly when we all had our in-depth consultations on CEAs and CMAs back at the beginning of the year, and we all got our little binder, there was a resolution that passed, and I'm hoping that someone can explain it to me. There was a resolution that passed, I think, in September 9th, 08, or maybe that's the number of the resolution, but we did something in that resolution that affected our CEAs or CMAs, and we were able to waive it or not collect it for an infinite amount of time. We lost dollars doing it, but it was during the recession, and we were trying to do the right thing by the developers and our communities. And I'm wondering if that's a solution until we get a long-term solution. As Member Gould pointed out, is what can we do right now to get these development moving, and come up with a long-term solution with Orange County government, changing their comp plan or whatever we need to do. But I really am focused on what can we do short-term to move these developments out of the queue, and if that resolution is a possible solution.
So let me go to Chris or
I don't have that right in front of me, but I think that's referencing back in the recession time period where they were reduced and some were waived. We
talking about the impact fees or CEAs? Stephen?
I believe there was a resolution passed where a lot of our earlier CEAs, because we were collecting a pretty minuscule amount, which is like $1,500 per unit, and the impact fees increased, that didn't make any sense. So the board passed a resolution to essentially waive the collection of those additional capital contributions because we're getting an increase in the impact fees at the county level. I believe that's what the school board member is referring to. I possibly some clarification there. I think it was 2005 or possibly 2008, but I believe it was very early on in the process.
Okay. Member Gallo, sorry.
Thank you, Madam
did
Chair.
not have recollections of that. Go ahead.
So I guess my question is, and I guess legal would have to inform us, can we do something like the board did back then as a short-term fix to get these developments out of the queue? If there's precedent that we've done it before, and then work on a long-term fix and work with Orange County to fix their comp plan, because we recognize it's not an us issue, it's a their issue. But at least clear up all these people that waiting, and as Pam and Member Gould or Member Burr pointed out some awesome points. I'm not going to reiterate what they said, but just so that we could focus on getting these out of the queue.
So,
Stephen?
Yeah, I could follow up to that a little bit. I know when that passed, those were CAs that existed. Those were already entered into. We've already had those agreements in place. But these that are in the pipeline, we don't have a CA with them. We haven't been really into anything with them. So I believe, I think I understand where you're going with that. That resolution was really for the early CAs where we were collecting a relatively small amount of capital contribution, and our impact fees went up so much that we said, fine, we don't need this from you.
Because we actually ended up collecting more from them in impact fees than what we had anticipated. I understand. Okay.
Which is not the case that we're looking at today. But we can pull that. The legal can look at it, but I don't have the answer today.
Okay. So we'll try to better understand what took place. I think we have to recognize if we do something right now, for the ones that are in the pipeline, we have to figure out why we stopped doing it for those who aren't in the pipeline. Or the differential that we used in the past was that they were in the pipeline before this legislation changed. They could not have known it was going to change. They made investment decisions based on the rules of the game as they existed. And so that was the reason that the legal team here and at the county felt that they could put in the indemnification clause and move forward. But legal has direction to look at whether there's some other short-term option that hasn't been thought of. We'll also be meeting again. We met with the county planning and legal team last week. We'll be meeting again with them in the near future, and we'll probably include GOBA and the apartment association organization in those conversations. So, Dr. Gordon.
Okay, thank you so very much, Madam Chair. Okay, I think I'm the only one on the board that isn't doing all of this. I got a lot of questions, but they're not questions, they're really statements. Oh, wow. I mean, okay, I'm hearing a lot, and I'm glad that we're doing this workshop because, and I know, Doc, I know to you, Madam Chair, I have to say this. I've seen you had to switch from one hat to another hat tonight. You had to be John Q. Public tonight. You had to be the former mayor of Orange County. I'll give you another hat. You wore 4 hats tonight. Then you had to be a county commissioner sitting in the chair. And I sat through all of this, watching it evolve. Your first hat was John Q. Public. Second hat was mom, where your kids were impact. Okay, go back and bring that up. Third hat when you got elected as a county commission. Then the fourth, you stayed there 8 years. And then the fourth hat was you became the county mayor and you served in that role for 8 years. And all of this evolved around those 16 years, okay? A lot of people don't know that, they don't understand it. It was brewing, but it was just so totally out of control. One thing that you said that I hope the board members listen to, when people joined and ran for office as county commissioners, I think at that time we didn't even have the county mayor when you came on board. You didn't have a county mayor, honey. So all this little mess was going on behind the scene that everybody would look out for different people. Similar what we're trying to do today, okay? And then with the years, one thing you said tonight that struck me. When you voted, and I said you were one of the stronger voices that were not famous because you were trying to look out for the school, being the mom, being John Q. Public, and being an elected official. You had to wear a lot of hats, but there were people coming before you at this particular time. Exactly what we have right here going on today. Those were not easy decisions for you to make, Madam Chair, at that particular time. One thing that people got to understand, you have to do what you got to do, but it has to be a meeting of the mind, and it has to be a coming together and involving all. But that first time you took that seat, as you stated, when you voted, everybody on that board was assuming that land use was there, zoning was there, and that capacity would be there. Well, I got news for you, all of y'all. None of you all knew, except the school board. It wasn't there. It wasn't. And that's why we are where we are today, ladies. That's why we're where we are today. Teresa, I have got to say, in her infinite wisdom, was the only one that allowed us, and no reflection, I'm not going to call the other chair. I had an opportunity to work under all of them. 2 men, 1 woman, 2 women. And Chair Jacobs was one. I know she saw the handwriting on the wall, but your hands were tied on many issues. But one thing you tried to do, and that's what you're trying to do now with this board to get them to see. All we have to worry about is, do we have capacity? That's it. Do we have capacity? Then the local citizens and the local government will have to do what they have to do. But I know in the middle of what we're going on now, you did something that none of the other chairmen, they did, but the board wasn't involved. There was no meeting of the mind. You started the meeting of the minds. You would have the school board come in. Oh, we battled. You know we battled, okay? But then you were trying to see this thing is going to get out of hand. And you were not thinking about running for chair at that time because the chair position was something else that came about. Too many little philangerings going on, messing up the school board. And it was all done for reasons that some of you will never understand. But I'm sure that Chair Jacobs understand, and Dr. Jenkins. She was on staff at that particular time. So in the meeting, we have not done what Stephen is trying to tell you to do and what the chair is trying to tell you to do. We haven't had the meeting of the minds with unincorporated Orange. We met with unincorporated Orange. We met with every 13 municipality. We met with every city and county commission. And the majority of it was done under your leadership, Chair Jacobs. You would let everybody come in. Then you had meetings on the side. Then we had a staff. And then you had a staff. And your staff would meet with our staff. And they would go back and tell you all what to do. Our staff would come back and tell this board what to do. And that was our meeting of the mind. And that's how we got a couple of the resolutions. That's how we got something solved. We haven't done that yet. And a lot of reasons why is because of what's going on right now. And as the chair stated, they're not going to come up here and sue us. They really got something to sue us. We'll sue them back, okay? And we've even gone to that. We have an interlocal agreement and we follow it to a T. The school board is not one to violate that agreement. We would not do that. So we would think if they sue us, somebody's out there rocking. And we'll make sure that they don't win because we're going to follow what we are supposed to follow. Great confusion just arrived, but we, the leadership, have got to pull together and go back what Chair Jacobs has started as the mayor on her final go-round. I don't know if you all understand what I'm saying, but we met. We even switched staff. Some of her staff came over to Orange County. Some of our staff went over they came over to Orange County School Board, and some of our staff left us and went over and worked with her. But we were able to get something done. So number one, Stephen is trying to tell you we gotta meet. I hear Chair Jacobs saying you're meeting, but we're not meeting like we used to meet with you. We're not doing that. We got to. Then we started meeting with the community to understand where they were coming from and what was going on. The next thing that I wanted to point out, no one has shared with Orange County Commission the impact that this House Bill 7103 is messing with us to determine the impact of trying to get capacity enhancement agreements together. It's just, no one has gone over and made a presentation. No one has talked. We just did it. We just did it. But we haven't taken it over to the people who can make the decision and who has given them that direction. I think, Chair Jacobs, if I'm dead wrong, Chair Jacobs, you can nod. I don't believe that the county commission has been told the impact that we are fighting with right now on what it has done and how it has determined capacity and how it has impacted us on how we are going to have to determine. We know why this bill was sent up there. We know. Some of y'all back people that backed it. You probably didn't know, but you were voting them in. So I always say who you vote in, they're gonna push their program. That's why it's very important that you know an elected official background. That's why you gotta know. You can't let them give you one thing and then they go back and push something like this. But it's there, and you voted for them, and now you have to deal with it. I never voted for anybody in my community that didn't back us. That's the way we go. That's how we roll in our community. I'm sorry. We try to get people that's gonna always, even if they go down losing. I learned that from Mabel Butler. If you go down losing, at least you did the right thing, okay? The next thing, solving the overcrowding, I heard Member Bird, and God bless her, because I hear her frustration with her coming out of a construction family. I hear her frustration. But we got to begin to look at Orange County is not a small urban county. Apopka will no longer be urban, okay? It may be a metropolitan city by itself, okay? Like Celebration is doing over in Osceola County where I work. The main thing is, it would be good if we could build buildings smaller, but where are you going to put it? Where are you going to put them? Right now, I heard Chair Jacobs talk about the land development. Not the land development, but look at what we're doing to our real estate department by just the people moving into Central Florida. And you better believe after this pandemic clears, when this thing clears, you better believe people are going to move to Florida more than they have ever. Not only that, Melissa Bird is almost landlocked because we were trying to buy up the property out there in Apopka. When I was teaching at Dream Lake, we were trying to buy everything down there with Rock Springs and everywhere. We were getting the elementary schools, but we never got any decent middle school property, and we never really got any decent high school property. We just kept making Apopka High bigger and bigger. So the main thing is, what I'm trying to say to you, I love hearing the chairman, and I'm going to have to look to her leadership with Dr. Jenkins, that we put the meeting of the minds together like she did when she was on that last leg as the mayor. Because I know when she looks back now, I know you're saying, Madam Chair, you can let me know this. Oh my God, I didn't know it was all about this. Because you know why? Nobody knows that there are two separate governments here. Everybody thinks that the school board is run like the city. They think that it is run like the county. No, it isn't. It is a separate entity. It is a separate government, and we are ruled by the state. That's why I say we're not going to violate any laws. We're not going to get sued for violating anything because we fall under the Constitution of the state of Florida and not under the charter amendment of the county or any local government. So that's the difference. So what I'm looking at and proposing that we get the minds together, not in no little pit-pity way. Dr. Jenkins and Chair Jenkins running over there. We had teams. We had teams that knew what they were doing, and they worked with Chair Jacobs and the County Commission and Buddy Dyer with Orlando and trying to make sure we were going the right way. Because when you walk out of that room, you want everybody to be on the same page. You don't want to just say, we're going to vote this in and vote this out. Every board that voted had a reason for why they did what they did during that time. We're in different times right now, totally different times. So I would like to see the leadership take the helm, move forward. There's always going to be overcrowding. Now, one thing about what people don't understand about Tallahassee, every school that we built, yes, some of the schools get under capacity because they build another community and people leave, or now we have the word that I don't like to use, and people could go where they want to go now, okay? But what a lot of people do not understand, they really don't understand. People are going to go where they want to go. It doesn't matter how small you build it. They don't care how large you build it. Most people are going to want to go where they want to go. That's why it's so important that their community is involved, that the government for those 13 municipalities and unincorporated Orange County is totally involved. And then we can sit together at the table, not you trying to outdo me. I love what Chair Jacobs said. All we got to worry about, and we tell them, yes, we have capacity. No, we don't. And they got to figure it out. That's where the meeting of the minds. So, Madam Chair, I thank you for that. But I want to ask you, now you don't have to tell me today. I'd love to just sit down and have Deborah because I'm curious, because I knew that this day would come. I knew that this day would come. Because sitting in one chair is totally different sitting in another when you know the real deal. But you fought for us, and I thank you. You tried, but you couldn't do it all by yourself because sometimes you were outvoted. And you had to move on. Sometimes you didn't agree with us. And you had to move on because you were trying to work with your constituents within that county. Now here we are. And I knew this day would come. So now where do we go from here? We're going to get the minds back together again. And we're going to solve this problem because it's not as hard as we think it is. The hardest part is getting the land before the developers get it. Because once they get it, it's going to be awfully hard for us to be able to build a middle, a high school, elementary, or an alternative school, any place, if we don't get out there and do what we need to do. So I thank you for that. I thank my board for their wonderful comments tonight. We will do it legally, and we will get this thing accomplished. And I thank the legal staff and our staff and General Counsel, Ms. Amy, and the chair and Superintendent Jenkins for bringing this to us because this is what we need. And like we did it, every municipality needs to do it. And definitely the mayor of Orange County and the county commissioners, because they are not aware the impact that this bill is going to play in this county and on the school board of Orange County. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. We do have a lot of history. Whew. Member Byrd.
Thank you. I don't know if I want to follow Member Gordon. That was good. That was a lot of history. Listen, I agree that we should only be responsible for saying yes, we have capacity, or no, we don't. I've said that all along. I don't know why we were ever even put in that position. It's why I haven't liked the CEA process from the beginning. It just muddied the water, and it made us certify capacity that we really didn't have.
Thank you.
And that's why I've never liked it, and I wanted out of it. So that's why I'm happy to see us at a point where we can say, you know what, this is all we can do. We can say yes, we have capacity, or no, we don't, and that's fine. But I still think that while that is not our job, it is our job to make sure we have schools, appropriate learning facilities for our kids. And so I still think it's our responsibility to try to continue to chip away at this problem of our overcrowded schools and try to come up with solutions. And that's why I think that that going out to our community, to our developers, to our builders, to our city governments and our municipalities, like Dr. Gordon said, get those minds all together and let's come up with solutions that we haven't thought of before, and figure out ways to, make it better, because that is our responsibility. But I understand completely what you're saying, Chair, that really it's our job just to certify capacity, yes or no. So and that's fine. But I also still go back to, what Member Gould was trying to say, that that I am worried that if it was that easy to say, why we didn't say it 9 months ago, or why we didn't just come out and tell all these people that were waiting in line for CEAs, why we didn't say, oh, we're not going to do it. We're just going to say, no, we don't have any, and go on to the county and go handle it with them. If it was that easy, why wasn't it just?
But we did. I'm sorry, but we did. That is exactly what we've told them from the get-go. Every conversation I've had has been consistent. We don't have any more tools. We have nothing. What little we had, and I've been very candid with them, what little we were collecting was never enough, but it was in an ILA. I inherited it. This board inherited it. We've lived up to and honored that agreement. Now we can't do that anymore. So we have no more options. The only option is to change the legislation. If that doesn't work, we have no options. The next option is you go through the joint approval process. It wasn't until very recently that we all discovered, not we all, I think the county knew, but that most of us realized that there was this one language that got added to the comp plan. And that's when the issue was it's not even available to us right now. So I agree with everything you just said. And I think the one place, we ought to be giving the best accurate information we can when asked. What is our capacity situation? What is our growth projections? When do we think a new school will be coming online? I have looked at, we haven't spent time on this, I have looked and poured through our budget. That's where the Capital Renewal Fund, and seeing that the board previously had identified if funds are sitting there and they're not going to be used for 10 years, but we can build a school and pay it back in 5 years, should we build it now? Yes. So I think that the focus that we need to take responsibility is for the things we can control. The things we can control, our budget, how we spend our money. Your ideas. Are there different ways we can build schools? I keep thinking about incremental, but we don't want to incrementally add on. Vice Chair Gould pointed it out. Keep adding a wing. You'll take a 3,000 student school and it'll be 5,000. That's not a good learning environment. So I think we need to think of all the things that are in our control, and we need to own those and do everything that we can to expedite the schools for our kids and for our economy. That's our place. I totally agree we have a place. That's our place. And then we need to be honest with everybody about what we can't do. Because if we continue to pretend that we just need to think harder and figure this out, or we need to just waive the charter amendment provision and say we can issue a CEA when we really don't have any capacity, we're just punting the ball. And we're responsible to our citizens when each of us is up for election and they say, wait a minute, you had this thing, you were supposed to be having capacity, you really didn't have capacity, and then you just blew the whole thing up. No, we need to go through this openly, honestly, and fairly. And fairly means accepting what we can't do and telling developers there's another channel. It's the joint approval channel, but that door is shut and we can't open it. I agree with Dr. Gordon that we should all have to come together, but I wanted to make sure that we all understood the same set of facts, that we understood, because I keep hearing from board members, well, I don't understand this. I don't want to sit down at the county commission and have us not understand what we're doing, what we've been doing, how we got here, what we aren't doing, but it's in the interlocal, so we were, but it really didn't work. All the things that you just said, I wanted to have that conversation amongst us and get it clear in our own heads. What do we own? What have we done? And where are we going? We may not all agree, but at least let's know where we are before we sit down with another governmental body and ask questions that maybe we wish we would have asked amongst ourselves. That was my initial thinking. Plus, I don't think the county commission's ready to have that conversation either. They're going to have a work session on this after our work session. I think they have it scheduled, but they were waiting until we had our work session. And of course, they've got COVID. They had sales tax, sales tax that they were working on. They've had a lot of things that have been priorities and continue to be priorities. And this needs to be a priority there just as much as this board has made it a priority here. That's my 2 cents. I'm sorry, Member Bird. Go ahead. I so interrupted you. I so apologize.
No, it's absolutely fine. Could I just say then, maybe what we need to do is something more absolute. Like maybe we just need to come up with a resolution tonight or sometime soon saying that is our position, that, stating just what you said, it is our position, that it is our job to only say yes or no to capacity, and this is what we're going to do. And it's up to the municipalities and local governments to approve developments, not us. And then just to make it perfectly clear that we are not holding anyone back anymore. I think there's been so much kind of wavering back and forth and so many discussions that maybe we just need to be really clear about our position and share that with our community. And I think doing that through like a resolution would be a great option.
Okay. So, Member Bird, on my way here this evening, I was thinking that what I would really like to see after this is a written document that, as succinctly as possible, describes why we're where we are. What is our role? We were able to satisfy that role through the interlocal, and it was taken away because of HB, to try to explain how we got to this situation, and that because of that, we are not in a position to issue CEAs anymore. And if we had that document, people could then go, oh, okay, let me read this, let me see, I understand, I get it. Maybe they wouldn't get it, but at least it would be something tangible that they could say, I get where the school board is. And I hadn't thought of it as a resolution. I think that would be a perfect way of communicating what our position is and why. But we have to get to a point where we agree on what our position is. And this is a rough start, but it's just how you have to go through this process. So, and obviously we wouldn't do it tonight because we're not making a decision tonight, but that would be a way to resolve any confusion that exists about who owns what part of this problem and who controls the pathway to a solution and what control, if any, do we have. And, even focusing on part of what we will do is continue to evaluate the scarce resources we do receive to make sure that we are providing capacity as quickly as we can, given the circumstances. That could even be in there, that's our role. Yeah, maybe. All right, food for thought. We can. I like that idea a lot, but it's you two of us talking right now. Member, Vice Chair Gould is up next. Member Byrd, are you finished? Member Byrd?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Vice Chair Gould.
This is directed to Steve and the staff, Chair.
Yes.
Over the last 12 months, that list that we just saw, how many in writing were referred to the joint approval process?
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Over the last 12 months, how many that are on the 2-page list of CEAs are referred in writing to the joint approval process? Back to referring to the interlocal.
We're still losing you right in the middle of it. In the last year?
I think the question is, in the last 12 months, how many of these on the list were given notice of the joint approval process? That's the question.
Yes.
Well, I can't tell you for the last 12 months because I haven't been here for 12 months. But but for the projects that are on the list that I'm aware of, I'm not exactly sure how many have received formal notice that there's this process available. I know we've had verbal conversations with quite a few, and I don't have a exact breakdown of what projects those are. That, you know, this is a provision in the charter, but of course, on our end, the county's end, the city's end, nobody's really executed it. So what does that look like? But I know there's been some verbal discussion, but I can't tell you if we've had any formal yes, no, this is what's the issue. I can only think of one, and that was the Hammer project up in Apopka, because that's the one that we had the most recent issue with this.
Went back to Apopka.
Right. And I know for the Ocoee Village Center one, that analysis was done, which, you know, that option is available to them based off of the analysis we did a couple days ago. But for the rest of them, I don't have an exact list for you.
Okay, so, and thank you very much for that answer. So Chair, I wholeheartedly agree that you have been doing your best to educate everybody, but our processes have not followed that education up to this point, because that's why we had to spend so much time on this joint approval process tonight. Is maybe it was gleaned over at one point in my last 2 terms or during these 2 terms, but I don't think so. And it's never been in any chart, and I have CEA charts redrawn every single year because I have to go out and explain them to the community. So there is a misunderstanding out there, and I agree you have done a yeoman's job of trying to get everybody onto the same page in that way, but the development community, nor most of the municipalities, the elected officials on those municipalities understood it either. So I'm not saying that we should not do that. Just to reiterate, I love the idea of some kind of a resolution with that chart that shows where the money goes away. That's pretty self-explanatory. Pictures are always better than lots of words. But I still would like to have our staff seek short-term solutions that could come back to us, because I think more than half of us would like to hear any short-term solutions while we pursue the longer-term work groups, which are absolutely necessary, and sitting down with all of our fellow elected officials to grind through what needs to be done on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I think I can guarantee you that nobody ever discussed with you the joint approval process. I absolutely know that is the case. It's not even mentioned in the interlocal agreement.
Thank you.
The only place it's referenced in the interlocal agreement at all is there is a recitation of the a recitation of the charter language where it talks about it. But other than that, there's no process by which one would exercise it. It simply says you get certified you have a capacity, or you can seek to enter into a charter, CEA. It doesn't speak to it. So I suspect, as I've thought about this, and honestly, if I literally had not created and written that, I'm not sure that I would even know it, because nobody has talked about it in 16 years. And the only reason that anybody's talking about it now is because this other process that everybody was so comfortable with, the development community was comfortable with, the cities and the counties were very comfortable with, because it took the burden off of them of having to make tough decisions.
Yes.
And we absorbed that burden by answering this question and answering it according to an interlocal agreement that didn't really produce what we needed. So nobody's talked about it. I just assumed, because that's how it was supposed to work, that everybody knew it. And when I went through the ILAs, both of them, it's not even there. I looked at the county code. It's not in the county code, that process. The process just assumes it's going to come to us and we're going to fix it with a CEA, which we can't do anymore. So I completely understand why this is foreign and new. I can tell you, because it was so obvious to me, that when APOPCA came up, I'm like, you just go through this process. You approve it and you get the county to prove it. And that's when we discovered that the county's comp plan has this sentence in here. So the process that is supposed to work means that the county cannot follow through on their end of the process right now. So that was something that I just learned just in the last 3 months through the APOPCA situation. So you're completely right. This is new, it's foreign, and it's the reason why we thought that the primary focus of today was just to bring us back to home base. Where did we start? How did we get here? What's our role? Rather than to go into a lot of weeds, because I was pretty sure that most people, other than Dr. Gordon, who was here from the get-go, most people come in and they just inherit what they have, and they don't know what it was and how it's morphed and what it's supposed to be. They just know what it is, and we make some incremental changes. We used to get all the mitigation up front, enough to build the new school, and then it was, well, we'll get some of the mitigation later, and then it was, we'll get this litigation much later, the mitigation, and it's morphed and morphed and morphed into something that is all that board members know when they come in. It's all the county commissioners know. It's all that the cities know. It's all that the developers know. It's all that anybody knows. And again, if it wasn't for the freak occurrence that I would have been, as Kat described it, the mom who was sitting in the middle of this chaos, wondering why it wasn't working, right? And then I would run for county commission. Specifically, I thought about school board, guys. I ran for the county commission because I thought I would have more control over school overcrowding. Right. Because they were the ones who were controlling the land use. And I wanted to connect the two, and I got them connected. And then I come over here, and what happened? Health Bill 7103? Like my first year? How does that happen? Right? So freak occurrence, but I appreciate we're all learning. We're all trying to get to the same place, and that is something that is fair and reasonable. We just have to understand our limitations so that others can do what they need to do to move the ball forward. Stephen, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, Chair. Actually, Amy did a little research while there's been some discussion, but the city of Orlando actually has the same comprehensive plan policy about the CEA requirement unless it's full capacity.
No.
So that is something that we'll probably need to work with them
No way.
on. It is in their public schools element of their comprehensive plan. So while they only have one outstanding item on our list, it is our biggest one. So that's something that we'll need to work with them on as well.
Why aren't they fixing it? Do they know it? I'm sorry, I'm so floored.
I can't answer that.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for the research.
We can take bets, and I would say no, they don't.
I'm sorry. That's really only because the culture between the county and the city for so many years, the county was far more likely to say, slow down on development. Let's make sure the infrastructure, whether it was roads or schools or water, the county has always been more conservative about making sure that we had the funding, the infrastructure, than the city has been. for so many years that I just was floored that was in the cities. Wow. I bet they copied ours.
And
The
I have to
counties,
give
theirs.
I have to give credit to Laura. She's the one that tipped me off.
Wow.
Oh,
Thank you, Laura.
All right. Vice Chair, anything else? Okay. Wow. Okay. I think, forgive me if I'm off. I think I'm going to Dr. Gordon next.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, here I go. I'm just having a lot of fun.
Yes, you are.
May I offer a suggestion?
Please.
Because that's what we have to do. I think, Madam Chair, you've done a remarkable job in handling this tonight. And you've listened to every one of us. And I know we kind of lost, our other board members are really listening because I'm sure that they have checked with the superintendent and everybody knows enough of something. But when we get like this, how we were able to get out, you're hearing everybody say the resolution. It wasn't just that we needed a resolution. What we did, when we got to this point, because this is about one of the best briefings that I have sat in on this kind of, I love it because this is the best that I've seen in my 20 years on the board. So I got to give you this because everybody had been confused over the years. And I know you have some staunch people in here, like you said with Colbert. I know Melissa got the frustration coming because she knows something. And of course, you had Colbert who's been working along with this. And then there's Castiglione that's been in the legislation and saw what we've been going through when they gave us no money to build any schools. Okay. And I thought we were sending her out there to get some money so we would be able to build local schools, but they don't do that. I love you, Karen Castiglione, Dr. Castiglione. But what we do when we get to this point, Madam Chair, this is where you have the authority to task the superintendent. And you cannot task her staff, but you can task the superintendent and the general counsel because those are our only two employees other than, Ms. Lindsay. But the main thing is who falls under the general counsel. You can now, in your infinite wisdom from what you have gathered here, we need a document of some kind because you hear Byrd member, Melissa Byrd stating, I got to get something because they are running for office. And one thing that this board has always done in previous years, if there were people running for office, we never left them out there stranded because we know they were good. We know they were fighting for their community. We know that their community wanted them back. So we would do something that they would be able to take something back and work with their community that will let them see we are working on it. And we're in the middle of a very bad thing going on now with no vaccine. My whole thing is no vaccine. And I know that people will understand it. People are trying to get back to work, but within your document, whatever you're going to call it, you can task with your wisdom, working with them, letting Dr. Jenkins them do what they do best. This is where we don't have to do it. All we got to do is task the superintendent to come out with the general counsel, come up with this document that's going to be able to let us notify the ones that are waiting, notify the public. This is the direction we are going, and you have the background to really help the superintendent get this done. But she has the know-how because she knows by state law what she can do legally as the superintendent and what she cannot do. Okay? So the biggest thing is, I think you will be able to come up with that, hearing all the things that you've heard tonight, knowing what you're knowing, but we don't have to do it. They've heard us loud and clear, and you're going to say, based on what we have heard tonight, we can, your consensus is there. We need something. We need something for the public, and you can use your authority to give her that task and let them see what they can come back up and bring it to us, as quickly as they can, and the meeting of the minds will come together.
Thank you
for letting me share.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for your advice and your wise counsel. I very much appreciate it. Needed a land.
I learned that. I learned that from a school board member on this board. Thank you.
Excellent. So here's where we are then. We have Member Colbert, then we have Member Castor-Dental, and then Dr. Jenkins. I'm going to call on her for some closing comments for us. Member Colbert, you're recognized. You've been so patient throughout this process.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make it quick because I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm and my power's been flickering. So if I go out, you'll know where I am. I'm in the dark. So I believe that we are together, bringing our minds together, and we are getting somewhere. I really began to light up when I heard Member Byrd's suggestion, followed by your thoughts on the way to the meeting and Dr. Gordon's subsequent comments. I do believe we need a public declaration of our roles and responsibilities in this. Our only role and responsibility is to declare whether there is capacity available or not. And at the bottom, we should reference Martinez Doctrine, the Charter Amendment, the ILA, and even the statute. That is what backs up our public declaration of our roles and responsibilities. We can make it clear that there is another pathway, the joint agreement, if we want to get into that. But I think the public, the building community, other elected officials need to understand clearly what our role and responsibility is, and it's backed up by all of those agreements, amendments, and statute. And it's as simple as that. And that's where we start. That's it.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Castor-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to let everyone know that I was actually at this meeting. No, my internet has gone in and out as well. But this is the first time I've had a chance to say anything. But I just want to share how much I have benefited from this discussion tonight, listening to the board members, what they're trying to deal with the CEAs in their own districts. In District 6, that's not really a concern, so I don't have as much of the interactions with people who are having issues with this. But I really do appreciate everyone's positions and opinions and experiences and questions. And then Dr. Gordon and the chair, you guys kind of gave so much more context and history and allowed me to kind of fully understand just like you've said, our roles and our responsibilities and our limits. I do make one suggestion, and it might just be when we're trying to make things more clear for the public or the developers or whoever is going through the process, that our role is to say yes or no as a school board. I think just that term right there is enough to confuse people again.
Yes.
Because our role is not to say yes or no to the development. We're just saying, in fact, I don't even want to use the word no. Our role is yes, we have capacity, or we do not have capacity.
Yeah.
Not yes or no, because it might sound like we are the ones who are saying you may not go forward. Yes. So just a slight little difference. We have capacity or we do not. So those are just my thoughts, and I appreciate the discussion. Thank you so much.
M&Ms.
M&Ms. Okay, I am not Amy.
I want to throw them at you across the way.
Ladies, I'm not Amy, but I've taken Amy's computer because mine my battery just died. So I heard most of what you said. I know that the rest of the team picked up the rest. Let me go to, and I'm so glad you're still there. I was wondering, a couple of you were so quiet. Member Lopez, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was facing the same situation of school board member Dr. Castor-Dental, with the internet, with the thunders, with everything at the same time. I'm in my mom's house doing the meeting in the room of my mom, but at least I'm with my mom, and I'm happy to be here with her today. So I'm very glad. I'm very pleased to learn more about this topic, and I highly appreciate the great presentation from Steve, and also the history that school board member Dr. Gordon, was bringing to the table. So I also, yeah, I highly appreciate as well your clarification because it was very helpful for me, and I know that I understood a lot through this meeting. I think that our community will understand even more with your comments in between the the comments from other school board members. So thank you so much for the clarifications, and also I also agree and with school board member Cover about it's like a summary of all of these meetings to have that document where establish our position on this matter. So thank you so much.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I am going to call on Dr. Jenkins. I love exercising the good advice of Dr. Gordon, and that is to ask. I hate directing her, but to ask her if she would step in and help us create a document that encompasses what she's heard today, what our roles and responsibilities, something that everybody would have a chance to see, obviously. And if we can have agreement on what that document end result is, I think it will remove a lot of confusion in the community. I think it provides a pathway forward for the community. And I think it can. I know that Dr. Jenkins and Ms. Envol can write it with the tone that reflects how we feel as community partners that care about our kids dearly and care about our economy as well, but know our place and our responsibility. Dr. Jenkins,
All right.
jump back over to my computer where I can still hear you, but please, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, turn that volume back down over there. Amy and I are pretty adept at coming very close to mute. That's why we don't have the headphones. So a couple of things come to mind. First, let me thank both Chris and Stephen, Amy, the chair, for just tireless effort around helping to boil this down to the information that everyone needed to consistently understand, not just our board, but our community, developers, and other elected officials. This actual document, while going through it may have been painstaking for some, especially those who are already familiar with it, it did a tremendous job of getting us all on the same page.
Yes.
And I think it also serves, in the format that it's in, I usually prohibit too many words on individual PowerPoint slides, but here's the thing. This actually can serve as a tutorial. If you have people who are asking you questions about it, if you want to review it for remedial purposes, anyone you wanted to refer to this actual PowerPoint, it really does read like a tutorial. If you weren't present during the presentation, you can still go through the PowerPoint and get a pretty sound understanding of the history and how we ended up where we are today. And so I want to encourage board members and anyone else that's listening, someone who didn't have a chance to tune in to the actual presentation, encourage them to actually look through this PowerPoint. It reads like a tutorial and it will be very helpful. So share it with others. And I think the most critical issue that we all have sound agreement and understanding on now, and hopefully all of those who've tuned in, is what the role of the board is versus what the role is of the municipalities. And so we will certainly work on that resolution, that public statement that helps us convey that. We are community partners, we are corporate citizens, we certainly want to do our part, but everyone needs to understand what our limitations are and what our responsibilities are. And I couldn't help but, Chair, want to make sure people understand, and just in case someone's thinking a simple solution is just to go down that joint approval process, there's a glitch there as well because of the county's comp plan. And now we're here because of the city's plan as well. And so while we would love for that to be an easy solution for developers, there's a glitch there as well. And so we will work on that public statement, on that resolution on behalf of the board, certainly with the expertise in this room that I've noted previously, and have something prepared for the board for that public statement. Thank you again for sitting through a really intense tutorial, but for those who needed to have a clearer understanding, I think we've accomplished that. I'm hearing it from board members. And so I believe we've accomplished what we had in mind for tonight, and we know how to move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. It was it was also an intense discussion, but one that we needed to have that I think was incredibly beneficial for all of us, and I hope for the public. I think it's helpful sometimes for the public to know that the things that we grapple with aren't easy, and sometimes they're messy and they're difficult, and sometimes they're uncomfortable, but they're necessary. So I want to thank all of you for your engagement, and all the board members for your engagement tonight in this discussion, for your heart and your intellect and your creativity and your innovation, and always trying to find solutions. Please don't ever give up on trying to find solutions. There's always going to be a better way to do things, no matter how well we do them. And Melissa, to your ideas, I think we need to explore what is the best way to provide as much capacity as we can. All ideas are on the table as long as they're within our control. So with that, without any further comments from board members, I am going to adjourn this meeting and be very grateful to each of you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Well, good night.
Night.